Good morning. Welcome to our council session for March 5th. We will begin our session with an invocation by Reverend Holly R. Jackson from United Church of Christ of Seneca Valley. Please rise as you're able.
Good morning. I invite you to quiet your spirit and take a moment of intentionality to prepare yourselves for the work that you will do today. Holy One, known by many names and yet beyond all names, we stop for a moment before beginning the important work of this council in order to intentionally center ourselves and seek wisdom and guidance. We ask your blessings on the people who have been called to lead this community in which we live and work and play. This Women's History Month, we especially lift up the women of our county into the divine light. We are thankful for women's leadership and for the courage and perseverance of women who seek to make a difference in the world in ways large and small. We give thanks for the rich history of women from whom lives we now reap our own liberating hope. We ask that you might help this body to listen to women, women of different skin colors, of different national origins and backgrounds, women across the spectrum of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, women of various abilities and disabilities, and women of varying social and economic status. Hear them and see them and work for justice on their behalf. Divine Creator of the universe, we are standing on holy ground, for wisdom is present here, and where she is, it's holy. Grant those assembled in this room the wisdom and courage to know and do what is right and good and true, even when it is difficult. Help us to speak out when we must tell the truth or champion a cause, and teach us to be patient and receptive when it is time to listen. In this room we gather as creation's beloved children. Help us to treat each other with kindness and love, no matter the political agenda or issue. This we pray in the name of all that we hold sacred and holy, all that we hold good and right and true. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Jackson. Now we are going to proceed to presentations. We have a proclamation recognizing National Nutrition Month by Councilmember Rice.
So good morning, everyone, and you see that I'm joined by a person to my right who is participating just as I would in everything that it means to be a council member. And so Chloe Apple, who is our council member for a day, who I will introduce later with a proclamation, is actually going to be presenting this proclamation along with me. But it's incredibly important also because she is a student within MCPS, and so has a great deal to say about school nutrition, and maybe that will be her essay next year for when it comes to the Council Member for a Day competition. But this week is National School Breakfast Week, and by the School Nutrition Association, this is an opportunity for us to continue to highlight the fact that we need to focus on nutrition within our schools and make sure that they have access to meals as a whole, and that those meals are also nutrition and giving them what they need. Maryland is actually a top 10 state for participation in the free and reduced meal students in school breakfast and school participation in the school breakfast programs. As a matter of fact, just so folks know, we actually have also started working in the summer to ensure that folks who receive free and reduced meals can actually still receive those meals in the summer, understanding that many people in our community continue to be food insecure. Partners like Montgomery College, who provide access to food and nutrition services through the Montgomery College Food Pantry, and Manna Food Center, who's a great partner, and some of the charity networks who work with them. Wellness programs within Montgomery College that, again, talk about all the different things that you can do to remain healthy, whether it's on-campus gym access or funds for off-campus gym access, weight management resources. Within Montgomery County government and our facilities, we have our Live Well program that ensures that through Virgin Pulse with on-site fitness classes and wellness workshops and webinars, we're trying to do all we can to provide folks with opportunities and options that allow for them to be healthy. We know how important this is because, as our county health officer will tell you, it really is important for us when it comes to some of the health disparities that we continue to see in our community, but also in some of the challenges that we continue to see with health throughout the nation. And so being able to have healthier options for all means so much. And so I'm going to start off reading the proclamation, but I did want to allow Travis Gales, if you wanted to just say something about the county's direction when it comes to health promotion and what we're doing to promote health and wellness, mainly through nutrition. So, Dr. Travis Gales.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice, for the proclamation and your efforts, and thank you to the council for your ongoing support of all of our public health initiatives and efforts, in addition to the efforts around nutrition. Before I make any further comments, it's important to highlight and identify those standing behind me who do the work on a daily basis to help uplift the county in the nutrition realm. We have representatives from HHS, University of Maryland, African American Health Program. Am I forgetting anyone? WIC as well. And it's fitting that this is National Women's Leadership Month, that we have a team full of women here leading us and guiding us in the right direction. So thank you all for your efforts. And just briefly, it's important to eat well, and it's important to just be healthy. There's not anything more magical that I can say from a health perspective. If we're healthy, we go to work, we go to school, we're productive citizens within our county. And so it's important to be healthy across the board, to live longer and be more productive within our society.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Gales. And so in fitting fashion, as council members do, we're going to alternate reading this proclamation. So whereas the U.S. Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics research indicates that 2/3 of U.S. women 20 years of age and older are overweight or obese, nearly 34% of adolescent females in the preconception years are overweight or obese, and more than half of the women in Montgomery County who experience pregnancy loss are overweight or obese. And whereas
obesity carries many risks for women, including an increased lifetime risk for type 2 diabetes, heart disease, joint problems, depression, and certain types of cancers, partially reproductive cancers, and whereas
in utero exposure to high-fat diet alters the fetal genome and predisposes the child to medical and behavioral health concerns, and birth outcomes are worse for overweight and obese women, even in the absence of other medical conditions or complications. And whereas
the nutritional status of women before, during pregnancy can increase the risk of poor birth outcomes, including severe complications, preterm birth, fatal or infant mortality, maternal death, and long-term health effects for children such as obesity, hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, learning problems, depression, and whereas
obesity is most common in the non-Hispanic Black African American female population, which is also the group most at risk for pregnancy loss and complications, with an infant mortality rate more than twice as high as that of their racial and ethnic groups in the county. And whereas
Montgomery County, in observance of the National Nutrition Month, encourages all residents, businesses, schools, and religious organizations as medical providers through policy and practices to adopt a healthy diet that includes a variety of foods, encourage regular physical activity, and set goals to achieve optimal preconception health and healthy body weight.
Now, therefore, do we, Mark Elrich as County Executive, Nancy Navarro as County Council President, and Craig Rice as County Council Member, do hereby proclaim March 2019 as National Nutrition Month in Montgomery County, and do commend this observance to all of our citizens. And it's signed by all of those this 5th day of March in the year 2019. Congratulations, and again, thank you to all of you for all of your advocacy and hard work. All right, we'll take the picture then.
Thank you very much. So now our next presentation is a proclamation recognizing Councilmember for a Day winner, Chloe Appel, by Councilmember Rice.
Yes, please,
Apple.
please applause. So I started this program a few years ago, and this is the third council member for a day. I will say that, interestingly enough, all of our council member for a day winners have been women. So there's a challenge to my young men to make sure that they step up to the plate. But this is a great opportunity that we feel, again, for activism at one of its highest levels. It is incredibly important for us to ensure that our youth voices continue to be heard. We've seen mobilization when it comes to gun violence throughout the United States and seeing our children become more active. But one of the things that struck me about the essay that Chloe wrote was dealing with mental health. And it's one of the more silent issues that unfortunately only get attention when we have a bad event. But every other day of the year that nothing's happening, no one's talking about it. But Chloe wanted to make sure that we continue to focus on this, that is such an important issue, not just here in Montgomery County, but quite frankly, throughout the world. If we see people who aren't being able to get the mental health assistance they need, it presents them with many challenges. And that's what Chloe highlighted as a part of her essay. I encourage you all to read her essay. Her essay is online on my webpage. There are links on the County Council's webpage. But did just want to highlight for you a quote that she had, which I think is incredibly telling. In the same way, we would not expect Bryce Harper some people, yeah, to play with a broken arm. We should not expect our children to do the same with a mental illness. And it really is one in which we always treat the physical and talk about how we need to make sure that there's triage, that we have post-care and treatment and physical therapy and all the things that go along with a physical. But when it's a mental illness, it's oftentimes just a quick, oh, well, we'll just have someone talk to someone and then everything is better. And we need to do more. And that's what this young woman is crusading for. It's a reason why it touched us in our spirit in saying that this is something that needs to be heard. And so we couldn't be more proud of you, Chloe, in being our council member for a day, advocating for an issue that you care about, that's so important to our community, that we understand is something that we all need to do a better job of. And so before I read this proclamation, I just want to give you an opportunity to say a little bit about something that you care so much about.
So, hi. Well, I don't know really what to say, but I'm Chloe Apple. I am an advocate for mental health and mental health resources in every school in Montgomery County and all over the nation, so our students can feel like they have a place to go if they're stressed about a test or they're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And yeah. I don't really know how to do speeches, so.
That's all right. Let me just say, Chloe, you may not consider yourself not being able to do speeches, but you certainly know how to write essays, and you certainly know how to advocate when it comes to your position. We've seen your activism. We follow you on Twitter, so we know what you're doing, and you're doing a great job. Let me start off with this proclamation that reads, whereas Chloe Apple, a junior at Magruder High School, participated in our third annual Council Member for a Day challenge at the Montgomery County Council, and whereas this challenge was developed to encourage county high school students to get more involved with local government and to spur a deeper understanding of public policy issues that are important to our county's youth by shadowing the Education and Culture Committee Chair for the day during a council meeting, and whereas Ms. Apple and 10 other Montgomery County high school students from throughout Montgomery County were selected as finalists for the Council Member for a Day Challenge and received special recognition at our council's Youth Town Hall on October 24th. And whereas the winning entry by Miss Apple focused on mental illness among high school students and included her proposals for expanding mental health awareness and support services. And whereas Miss Apple's creativity, intellect, and interest in public service is clearly illustrated by her winning essay. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby congratulates Chloe Apple and recognizes her as the 2018 Honorary Council Member for a Day in Montgomery County, presented on this 5th day of March in the year 2019, signed by myself and Nancy Navarro, our County Council President. Chloe, deepest congratulations.
Congratulations. Okay, so now we are on to the proclamation recognizing Women's History Month. All right, so if can call over Delegate Morales. From Empower Her, Amisha Kunvar, Isabel Clovis Young, Diva Gaed, Emmett Kesse, just come over. It's your call. Caroline Dwyer, Ms. Shelley B. Cherry from Crittenton Services of Greater Washington, Siobhan Davenport, Megan Rognrud, Isabella Wise, Debbie Guerrero, and also I think we do have Ms. Shredevi Kalyan, who is Ananias Tanikonda's mother. Okay, everybody's here? Awesome. Okay, so in 1987, Congress passed the National Women's History Month resolution, officially designating March as Women's History Month nationwide in honor of the great women who helped shape our country. Today, we at the County Council continue this tradition with this year's presentation of our own Women's History Month proclamation. I want to acknowledge here today we do have Ms. Shebra Evans, who is the president of the Board of Education, a very strong woman in leadership here in our county, so an applause for her and her leadership. And we are extremely fortunate here in Montgomery County because we have a very strong commission for women. We have groups like Montgomery Women who are constantly looking at ways to enhance and to improve the lives of women. We have so many different groups also around throughout the school system that promote leadership in young women. And today I wanted to highlight what I consider is the current and next generation of women leaders here in the county, because each of them in their own way are really trailing and paving the way for enhancements, for improvements, for really taking to the next level what it means to address women's issues. And let me just say that women leadership does matter. I believe that the collaborative, collective, problem-solving, results-oriented, selfless leadership of women really is what's lacking right now, not just, I would say, in our nation, but really throughout the world. It is really imperative that women are giving the opportunity to step up in whatever sector, whether it's in elected office or leading corporations or nonprofit organizations, whatever it is. I think that, in my humble opinion, we are lacking and we are missing that type of leadership. And so we need to do everything possible to promote that. And I was glad to hear that, so far, all of the council members for a day actually are young women. As you can notice, we do seem to be missing a few women on the county council, so I am glad to see that we have a pipeline getting ready to take over these positions. Yes, absolutely. You bet. You bet. You know, it seems like young men usually do step up naturally, so we need to keep nurturing and we need to keep, pushing forward our young women. So let me just highlight some of the great aspects of the group of women that we have today. We have with us the Honorable Marisa Morales, who is a former delegate for District 19. She served from 2015 to 2019. She's taking a little break right now because then she's getting ready for the next level of, of leadership in the county. She is recognized by the Maryland National Organization for Women for her leadership on women's and immigrant issues. She was the lead sponsor of the Maryland Trust Act. She also sponsored the bill to establish a state work group to study safe harbor policy for youth victims of human trafficking. Throughout her tenure in Annapolis, Delegate Morales fought for the rights of victims of sexual assault on college campuses. Additionally, Marisa is the youngest Latina to serve at the state level in the country, and 5 years ago, she created the Women's Rally, an annual event promoting women's issues in Annapolis. So you can just see that she has been a really busy leader here in the state and will only continue to work on many of those issues. Empower Her provides leadership development opportunities for young women in NCPS, as well as valuable networks for the next generation of female leaders. Today we have the board of directors with us, and also there's a staff person sponsor, which is Ms. Shella B. Cherry. We have Crittenden Services of Greater Washington. They empower teen girls in the Greater Washington area from lower income families to make positive decisions about their future, create healthy lifestyle habits, and prepare themselves for a successful career. Additionally, the organization works to promote reproductive health and valuable education about contraceptives among young women. I do like to recognize Ms. Debbie Guerrero from Crittenden Pearls alum from Montgomery Blair High School, who is here with us as well. Last but not least, we wanted to honor Ms. Ananya Dadiconda, who is the student member of the Board of Education. And let me just say that as someone who served on the Board of Education, I am always blown away by the quality of the student members of the Board of Education. And it's hard because when I say that I have a favorite, then the next one comes and then they do some other amazing thing and it's like, okay, no, now this is my favorite, but it really is a family of amazing leaders. And I have to say that Ananya is one of them. She is so focused on her priorities and how to bring along the student leadership and has made an extraordinary contribution to the board. And although she unfortunately could not join us today, I do want to recognize her mom. She is the person, and this is what Ananya wanted me to say, that accepting on her behalf is the strong woman who shaped who Ms. Tadikonda is today, and that is her mother, Sredi Kalyan. And so thank you so much for being here and for letting us share in the leadership and amazing potential of this young woman. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have a Havoc Proclamation, and then I'll invite each of these amazing women, whoever wants to come up and say a few words representing the organizations. I will read the proclamation, and we do have personalized ones for everybody. And the proclamation says, whereas the National Women's History Month resolution was passed in 1987 by the United States Senate and House of Representatives and has been reaffirmed every year since then. And whereas during Women's History Month, we celebrate the courage, foresight, and creativity of women of every race, class, and ethnic background who have contributed to our country. And whereas this year's Women's History Month theme is Visionary Women, Champions of Peace and Nonviolence, focuses on those who continue to advocate and succeed in effecting positive changes to the lives of diverse American women. And whereas Montgomery County women, including Rachel Carson, mother of the modern environmental movement, Clara Barton, founder of the American Red Cross, and Emily Edmondson, freed slave and abolitionist, feature prominently in our local and national history. And whereas we honor the many women who have shaped not only the destinies of other women, but also the direction of our history, and we resolve to build on their efforts. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, celebrates and honors the leadership and trajectory of everybody that I just mentioned, and then we'll get all the proclamations. And be it further resolved that the Montgomery County Council recognizes and celebrates the achievements of all women through Women's History Month, presented on this 5th day of March in the year 2019, signed by myself, Council President. Round of applause for all these amazing leaders. Okay. Would anybody like to make some remarks?
Thank you, Madam President, and I'm going to just bring it down because I am vertically challenged. Thank you so much, Madam President, for your mentorship and your guidance and the path that you've paved. I also want to salute all the women who are in the room, and to the men in the room, you are our allies. I want to salute your mothers and your sisters, and I just want to thank you for this wonderful honor. Thank you very much.
Anybody else?
On the behalf of MoCo Empower, I'd like to thank Council President Navarro and our County Council for their support of MCPS student leadership programs and for acknowledging and recognizing the work of MoCo Empower. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. And from Crintonton, anybody wants to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to the entire County Council. Thank you to all of the women here, to our foremothers, grandmothers, etc., and to the men who are our partners in the work that we do. We at Crittenton Services of Greater Washington are proud to serve 200 girls here at Montgomery County, 6th through 12th grade, with positive leadership development, social emotional learning, self-advocacy, and advocacy skills. We thank you for this honor.
Thank you. And I just want to add that I can personally vouch for the extraordinary work of each of these women right behind me in these organizations. So please let's support them as they continue to provide amazing opportunities for young women. So now we're going to pass the resolutions, all the proclamations, etc. to everybody, and we'll take a photo. I want to invite Jody Finkelstein from Commission for Women, Patricia Metley, and Chloe Apple as well to join us. And if my colleagues can stand up so that we can have 2 rows, that would be really cool. All right. Okay, so on to our general business. Madam Clerk, do we have any announcement?
Yes, good morning. There is an addendum this morning. Added to the consent calendar is a resolution to appoint the Inspector General nominating panel. Also, an announcement is that the applicants for the Public Election Fund Committee interviews that were scheduled for this afternoon are being postponed. On March 26th, the council will hold a public forum on the county's campaign finance program beginning at 7:30 p.m. Persons wishing to speak on the matter may begin signing up on March 7th. And the council is still seeking applicants for 2 positions on the Montgomery County Planning Board. The deadline is April 24th at 5 p.m. The council did not receive any petitions this week.
Thank you. So the minutes for dates February 11th and 12th have been distributed. Are there any corrections from my colleagues? No? So hearing none, those are approved. Now I need a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
It is moved by Councilman Vice President Katz and seconded by Councilmember Hucker. And let me turn the lights on in case. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Just this particular project, the enhancement of the budget for the CIP for the South County Regional Recreation and Aquatic Center, I didn't want to miss an opportunity to just make a quick comment about that project. It's very near and dear to my heart, as you guys can imagine, but just want to highlight it for a few reasons. One, it's such an example of what we can do through public-private partnerships in the county. This is a unique initiative in partnership with the Housing Opportunity Commission, the Lee Development Group, and the county to build a world-class facility that on our own we would have really struggled to find the land for and find the operating dollars for as well. I also want to acknowledge what a incredible opportunity this is as a destination spot that will enhance the health and wellness of our residents, and really want to acknowledge the Department of Recreation, who has been working tirelessly to make sure that we produce a facility that we will all be extraordinarily proud of and that will serve people of all ages and abilities for decades to come and provide yet another treasure in downtown Silver Spring that won't just serve Silver Spring residents, but the county as a whole. So couldn't miss the opportunity to just share that with you guys. I'm so excited about this particular project, and that will be a ribbon cutting I know we will all want to attend.
Absolutely. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, just wanted to quickly echo that and applaud our colleague, Councilmember Albornoz, for his longstanding work on this. This was a lot that went into it, and I think it's a model not just for Silver Spring, but for the whole county. And I mentioned, and we talked quite a bit at the Fed committee, but I think this is a model where I'm hoping we can leverage private, nonprofit, and public resources to bring these community amenities, particularly in urban areas where land is tight and it's hard to find opportunities, and particularly in Bethesda. So that's my goal. I think there's definitely a need. There's ongoing conversations to figure out how we make that happen. I think I continue to believe that the only way we'll realistically be able to do it, particularly in our urban areas where the land is limited, is to be able to work with existing property owners and leveraging the nonprofit and for-profit communities in order to provide the type of amenities that our residents deserve, expect, and we're working hard to provide. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more lights, so all those in favor of adopting the consent calendar, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Excellent. All right, so on to item 4. This is introduction of bills. Item 4A is Bill 4-19, Personnel, Merit System, requesting salary history, prohibited. Lead sponsor is Councilmember Glass. Co-sponsors are Council President Navarro, Councilmember Katz, Councilmember Friedson, Councilmember Jawando, Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Hucker, Councilmember Reamer, and Councilmember Albornoz. There's a public hearing on March 26th at 1:30 p.m. Another bill, and I see the light. Councilmember Glass, I was wondering. It's like, oh, Councilmember Glass is not going to say anything, what?
There we go. I didn't want to interrupt you. Thank you, Madam President, and I think it's fitting today with the celebration of Women's History Month. I'm proud to introduce the Montgomery County Pay Equity Act. Back in December, days after I was sworn in, I was speaking with the Human Resources Department about hiring my staff, and was told that potential staff members would need to provide their pay stubs in order to validate the salary that they were going to be receiving here at the county council, and it struck me as odd. And so I started investigating it, and lo and behold, I realized that hiring managers here in Montgomery County have the discretion to rely on job applicants' pay history to determine their salary. So this legislation will forbid the county from requesting salary history of job applicants. Such a prohibition is important because pay history is used to determine future pay, when it is used to determine future pay, individuals become stuck in a cycle in which they quickly become undervalued, a cycle that disproportionately affects women. At a statewide level, we know that in Maryland, women earn 79 cents to every dollar a man makes. And that figure's even worse for women of color. African American women make approximately 69 cents, and Latinas make 47 cents for every dollar a man makes. And when such a discrepancy exists, it might feel like a small, minor issue to some, but the multiplier effect can become great. When a worker is shortchanged $100 or a few thousands of dollars year after year, that missing pay gap can become large enough to pay for a child's college tuition, get someone out of debt, pay for college, a new car, or even a down payment on a new home. But make no mistake about it, this is a real problem here in Montgomery County. I'll be sharing data with my colleagues and with the public, highlighting how systemic this problem is in the coming days. And to the 10,000 individuals who do work on behalf of the good people of Montgomery County, I want to thank you. And whether you identify as female, male, or are non-binary, I want you to know that a fair day's work will equal a fair day's wage. So I want to thank you, every one of my colleague councils, for co-sponsoring this bill. I look forward to further discussion at the council hearing and at work session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President. And I just want to congratulate my good friend and seat buddy, Councilmember Glass, on introducing this great legislation. It's really heartening to see just 2 months in that we're doing things that we talked about for 2 years, and making sure that we have pay equity and making sure that we have other issues that are cleared up in this county related to education and policing and all these things. So I just want to congratulate you. I'm honored to be a co-sponsor. As you know, I'm the father of 3 daughters and now a son and a working wife who has a good policy of 6 months off. We need to work on that too, as far as making sure that women have time off, and men when they need to take it off for any medical reason, but certainly maternity. And so I think this is the great step in the right direction here in the county. It's inexcusable. I was shocked when you told me that this was the case here in the Montgomery County. So it's just one of the many things we need to roll back and keep working on to improve who we are here. So congratulations, happy Women's History Month, and I'm just honored to support your first bill.
Councilmember Rice.
Yeah, well, let me just echo the accolades, but also talk about how Montgomery County continues to be a leader, because it wasn't shortly after Councilmember Glass had told me about this idea and asked if I wanted to be a co-sponsor that I immediately mentioned it at Memo. And both Howard County and Frederick County are looking to introduce the same types of legislation. Again, Montgomery County being a leader and really enacting change. And it is something that is incredibly important for us as we see the continued history. I'm very happy that you mentioned about the fact that, unfortunately, our women of color are at the bottom of that rung. It certainly is something that's personal to me, and sitting next to our council member for a day, who is 16, hopefully when she does enter the professional workforce, we would have fixed this problem to ensure that when she goes off to her professional career, she can ensure that she's receiving the same wage as any other of her male counterparts. So thank you very much for your leadership.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Councilmember Glass, I'm honored to be co-sponsoring this along with you. This is a fantastic piece of legislation, and I really appreciate the thoughtful manner in which you and your team went about requesting and seeking guidance from all of us as council members. I shared with you some concern about if a county employee wants to volunteer their past salary history, that shouldn't dissuade them from doing so if it can justify a higher salary. And that was acknowledged in this piece of legislation quite effectively, and will continue to provide the freedom of departments to do their principal work, but also keep in mind ensuring that we look at this legislation through gender equity. And I do want to acknowledge gender equity and that lens, because we are looking at things through a racial construct, as we absolutely should, but this council is poised to look at things through a gender equity lens moving forward as well. I suspect there will be a number of pieces of legislation that go in this direction, and I just want to commend and thank you so much for your leadership and look forward to the robust discussion as we move forward.
Councilmember Friedson.
Well, I'm going to add to the chorus of excitement and congratulations and my honor to be associated with this piece of legislation. When you and I first talked about your interest in introducing it, I was extremely excited about it after being stunned that it was the status quo for a county as progressive as ours. And I think, to me, most importantly, this is a really good example of how we can lead by the power of our example, and not only by the example of our power, particularly when it comes to our economy, when it comes to businesses. Our first reaction tends to be to regulating other businesses before looking inward, of figuring out what we're doing as a large employer of county residents and how we can lead the way. And I think, as Councilmember Rice, just mentioned, just by virtue of Montgomery County as a government taking a leadership role in some of these issues that are frankly long overdue, we can inspire not only other county governments, but I'm hopeful other private sector and nonprofit institutions to follow our lead. And so I commend you for doing this. This is not just a women's issue. This is a family issue. This is an issue where if you lift up women, you lift up families. When you lift up families, you lift up communities. And it's critically important. I think it is a great example of what we can do as a county government to really demonstrate leadership here locally, but also throughout the state and the country. And I just want to note, I love your lapel pin. It says feminist. And I would like one. So I'm going to talk to you after and find out how I get one. So thank you very much and congratulations again, and look forward to working on this important work together.
Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much. Unless Councilmember Friedson has the best eyes on the planet, he saw that as he walked past. There's no way I can read it from here. Yeah, strong eyes, right? But congratulations, Councilmember Glass, and I too am very proud to be a co-sponsor of the bill. This is an example that when we do something, because we've always done it that way, people just, once it was done, no one complained, or no one heard the complaint. And so therefore we decided that, we should just keep doing it that way. And it takes somebody to say, really? And so I think this is, as others have said, this is an example that once someone realizes that what we're doing is not correct, or that something needs to be corrected, that we join together, we do it, and then other people in the for-profit industries and nonprofit, for that matter, realize that this is something that they too should look at. So congratulations for all of what you're doing.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass. Really appreciate your bringing this legislation forward. Proud to co-sponsor with you. And the county does have a pay gap. Our pay disparity is no greater or no better than our success in addressing it is really no different than the private sector. And we should be doing a lot better than that. So I think this legislation is going to really put a focus on that, and we've got a lot more work to do. So thank you.
Yes, and I also want to just acknowledge and thank my fellow council member for this amazing piece of legislation. I think that there is no doubt that we have all been focused on what this issue means. We did pass two bills, and one in 2014 and 2015, but it really addressed issues with contractors and subcontractors, and it had to do with issues of retaliation because we wanted to make sure that the data was also there. It's great to have data, but as you noticed, as you pointed out, you were able to really zero in on what was happening in county government. The data was available, but nobody had really put two and two together in terms of what is actually happening with us. So I think that this collection of efforts, not just looking inward, but also making sure that our contractors and subcontractors and any other efforts we can pursue will get us to that point. So I'm really proud to serve with you and to see that this is one of your first big bills. I think it's awesome and very, I would say, auspicious in terms of Women's History Month. So this is great. All right. With that, we're going to now Another bill that is being introduced is Bill 5-19, Development Impact Tax for Transportation and Public School Improvements, Exemptions. Amendments, LEAP sponsor, Councilmember Reamer. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Council President Navarro. This is a really important issue. This is a law, this amends a law that the council enacted several years ago that creates a strong financing incentive for development to provide up to 25% or more affordable housing, which is a terrific policy. It was very controversial when we enacted it. I believe the council vote was a 5-4 vote. And, you know, it has been controversial. We got some comments from the county executive in his capital budget raising concerns about this issue. So my view is that the results of this legislation are speaking for themselves. Certainly willing to consider approaches that could improve or strengthen the bill. But what we've seen so far is that this has been used by developments that are providing 25% MPDUs, providing 50% affordable housing, providing even one example of a development providing 95% affordable housing in different parts of the county. And we have in the pipeline, we expect several developments in downtown Bethesda that will come forward providing 25% affordable housing. When we talked about this issue at the council, you know, there was a lot of skepticism that any developer would actually take advantage of it, that the impact tax waiver would not be sufficient to incentivize any development to provide 25% MPDUs. And then, of course, there was another perspective offered that all the developments will do it and that's going to bankrupt the county. I think what we've seen so far is a more targeted use. But the fact that we have developments coming forward in downtown Bethesda, I think is just so significant. I know I've been referring to this book ad nauseum, but this book, The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, about the history of segregation in communities and how many suburban communities were developed in the 40s, 50s, and even into the 60s, really as whites-only communities. And you see the legacy around you. We know that there is racial difference in who lives in communities around this country, and a lot of it has to do with the wealth that was created through that whites-only suburbanization, and then how that wealth was passed on from generation to generation, and how some people were locked out of that, especially, obviously, African Americans, but then other communities were given subsidies to create that wealth, which was then passed on. And we see that legacy around us. So the fact that we may have to step up and put our money behind solutions that might be a little bit more expensive, but bring affordable housing to communities that for generations people have been locked out of. That's what this legislation has been able to potentially bring about if these projects do move forward in downtown Bethesda. 25% affordable in downtown Bethesda. I don't think anyone would have thought that that was ever going to happen or would ever be possible. So having said that, you know, if the county executive has concerns about this bill, we invite him to make recommendations. He did not support this at the council, but we invite him to make recommendations about how we can improve it. And we'll have an open and constructive dialogue, and we'll consider ways that we can make it better. And we'll take it up at committee, and you know, we'll work our way through. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Reamer, for introducing this bill. Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Council President, and Councilmember Reamer, thank you for broaching this important topic. I wanted to request, just as a matter of in public, that the Fed committee maybe join up with GO on this and talk about it together. I think Councilmember Friedson's on GO, so he'll get it no matter what, and as is the council president, and I'm assuming you'll show up. So this is important to me. I'd like to it has kind of joint implications. So I just wanted to say that. And I think, I'd want to revisit this issue. I think many of us do. I question whether we're getting our bang for our buck with the investment. I think it's important to invest in affordable housing in a whole number of ways. I want to see it across the county, and I agree with your statement about racial segregation that we're still facing here in the county. But we need to make sure that all parties, ourselves included, being great actors ourselves and putting money forward, and our development community needs to understand that they need to do their part too. So I am looking forward to this discussion. I thank you for putting the bill forward, and I just wanted to make that request that we consider it as maybe a Fed-GO issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, usually when it deals with taxes, we do it jointly, so we'll make sure that we schedule that. And I appreciate also the comments. I do think that this is one of those times when we need to make decisions. It's like between you two babies, like, do we want affordable housing? Do we want this revenue? What's the sweet spot? I mean, there is, I think, some more conversations that we can have to figure that out. So I do appreciate another opportunity. All right, so item 6 is Bill 6-19, Landlord-Tenant Relations, Termination of Lease, Tenant Health and Safety. The lead sponsor is Councilmember Hucker and co-sponsor Councilmember Friedson, and a public hearing scheduled for March 26 at 1:30 p.m. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. Congratulations to my colleagues on the introduction of these two bills. I didn't want to add to the chorus to slow things down here because I knew I'd be speaking in a minute, but these are good initiatives. I'm introducing this legislation, colleagues, as part of our growing commitment to help our renter population. As you know, about a third of our residents are renters, and in the past few years, we've done a lot to give our tenants more protections. We have mandated more frequent inspections in law. We've made it easier for tenants to organize. We've provided more county resources to deal with renter issues, including, I think, 9 new inspectors. And one result of these stepped-up inspections is the recent finding by our DHCA of more than 2,500 violations at the Enclave apartments in Silver Spring. We have a lot of DHCA leaders here. Good job, guys, at tracking those down. And of those, 145 violations involved mold, which we designated in law a couple years ago as one of the list of possible health and safety violations we find in our apartments. These violations have led to students at Burnt Mills Elementary reporting asthma-like breathing problems and persistent headaches and nausea. And obviously that's unacceptable. And these violations are found not just in Silver Spring, but in apartments around the county. So Bill 619 extends our county's protections to renters who live in unsafe conditions, such as mold, such as rodent and insect infestations, and lack of utilities like heat and power, because if they've been shut off by no fault of the tenant. The bill gives these tenants the right to terminate their lease on 30 days' notice if the landlord has failed to fix health and safety violations after 30 days of notice from the county. Tenants left the Enclave to protect the health of their children after the landlord refused to remediate the mold in a timely manner. And they did so at significant financial cost to themselves. So I believe any county residents should not be living in any unsafe and unhealthful conditions, and to free themselves from those conditions, they shouldn't have to pay a huge fee just to move out and move into an apartment that doesn't make themselves and their children sick. So that's the point of the legislation, and I invite your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please add me as a co-sponsor. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Councilmember Hucker, for introducing this. As you know, I attended some of these Enclave inspections with you and spoke with the families at Burnt Mills, and this is a huge issue. I think the more protection we can provide to our tenant community to make sure that here in Montgomery County, again, in the wealthiest county, in the wealthiest state, in the wealthiest country on the face of the planet, that people have habitable homes and that are not living in these types of conditions is important. We took a great step with just cause eviction that we supported and has moved forward in the county delegation, the state delegation. So I'm honored to ask to be a co-sponsor of this bill with you and continue to work on these issues on the Fed committee and on full council. So thank you for introducing.
Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, thank you for introducing this bill, Councilmember Hucker. I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor of it. I think it's a good example of dealing with these issues with a scalpel as opposed to a hammer. I think sometimes our natural reaction is to use a hammer, and when we were in the joint Fed briefing on the OLO report with evictions, it was quite clear that there's a small number of bad landlords. And most landlords are good landlords, and they want their properties to increase in value. They want to treat their folks well. They want to keep their tenants for a long period of time. But for the small number of folks who don't do things the right way, who aren't protecting their tenants, who aren't looking after their properties, we ought to do everything that we possibly can to protect the tenants, and I think to protect the good landlords, and to make sure that folks can get out of a bad environment and can get into a good environment, protecting both the businesses that are doing the right thing and, most importantly, the families who are subject to these unsafe conditions. And so I appreciate the fact that this deals with it in a really thoughtful way to allow folks to get out of tenants. It's a breach of a lease if you're not providing that. This is a deal that a landlord is making, and that landlord shouldn't be able to hold it over the heads of folks who are living in their communities, particularly families. So I appreciate you putting forward this thoughtful piece of legislation, and happy to be a co-sponsor of it.
Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you, Madam President. I, too, would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Great. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Councilmember Hucker. As you mentioned, we have taken up quite a list of tenant rights and initiatives and other laws to strengthen tenant positions in the market. And you've brought yet the next bill to that conversation. So thank you. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rice.
Thank you. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Councilmember Glass.
Please add me as a co-sponsor as well.
Great. And Councilmember Albornoz.
Like to be added as well.
Major FOMO going on here. No, just kidding. All right. Yeah, it's very nice. Wonderful. Okay, so now on to item D. This is Bill 7-19, Environmental Sustainability Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, New Construction. Lead sponsor, Councilmember Hucker. Co-sponsor, Councilmember Fritzen. Public hearing scheduled for March 26 at 1:30 p.m. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I'm introducing this bill to help us meet our goal of eliminating our greenhouse gases by 2035. This bill expands our CPACE program, which, as you know, stands for Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, which the Council approved 4 years ago. The program makes it easier for owners of commercial properties to finance energy efficiency improvements in their buildings or renewable energy upgrades, like installing solar arrays or geothermal. It works this way. The county applies a surcharge to the property tax bill. The surcharge is used to pay off the loan that the owner took out to finance the improvements. The program doesn't cost the county anything. And because the county is essentially guaranteeing the loan payments, it's easier for the owner to get private financing. If for some reason the owner doesn't pay the surcharge, the usual procedures involving non-payment of property taxes kick in, which can, of course, end in foreclosure to protect the county's interest. The current program, though, only applies to existing buildings. And currently, we have 12 projects using about $8.5 million in CPACE surcharges. But Bill 719 extends the program to new construction. Other counties do this already. Baltimore County and Howard County do this. And last year, our Climate Mobilization Work Group recommended expanding this program to new commercial construction to help us meet our emission goals. I know of at least one new project in the county that is waiting to take advantage of this program if we decide to expand it to new construction. So this will not only help the environment, this will help our economic development as well. As you know, hardly a week goes by without us seeing new evidence, frightening evidence of climate change, from the melting of the polar ice caps to the flooding recently in the streets of Annapolis. We have to step up, and we have over and over, to protect the quality of life of our children and our grandchildren, but we're at the point certainly where we want to do everything we can. So I hope you agree, and I hope you'll support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Please add me as a co-sponsor. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, this is my co-sponsor day. I'm pleased and honored to be a co-sponsor of this bill as well. I think it's a good example of the carrot and not the stick in this particular example, and leveraging the county's ability to support our efforts to resolve climate issues without spending money. Without having to appropriate the limited dollars that we have. I don't think we're going to be able to spend our way out, or even to put enough sticks out there and to regulate our way to solving our climate emergency. We're going to have to put a lot of things, a lot of tools in the toolkit. And I think, providing this opportunity to leverage private dollars with the backing of public leveraging is a huge opportunity to be able to make a deep impact, which is one of our largest carbon emitters, which are existing construction and new construction. If we can make new construction as attractive as possible for the energy saving and carbon reducing technologies that we know work and we know are available, and make that as cost effective as possible for private builders and enterprises, we will see a huge reduction in our carbon footprint. And I think we will be leveraging the county in a way that moves the needle forward in the most effective way possible. So look forward to working on this together as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Please add me as a co-sponsor. It's a terrific initiative, and anything we can do to strengthen it will help a lot.
Vice President Katz.
Thank you. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor as well, please.
Councilmember Jawando.
I'd also like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Councilmember Rice.
Actually, I'm going to turn to my council member for a day first, who wanted to make a comment.
So I love this bill for protecting saving our climate, because climate change is a huge epidemic that's happening. But also, it's already been confirmed that the world's basically going to be dead by 2030, and you said it would be done by 2035. But it wouldn't cost the county anything, so I think that you should sacrifice the money in one section, I don't know the correct term, and spend more money on this thing to stop the irreversible damage by 2030, before 2030. Yeah.
So no, it's excellent about encouraging us to continue to push forward. I certainly want to sign on, Madam President, as a co-sponsor, but it certainly is the urgency of us. And we know that we here in Montgomery County continue to be leaders. Other jurisdictions certainly aren't doing as much as we are, and we encourage folks throughout the state to continue to do more. But we know, as Councilmember Ferde Appella said, that it's incredibly important for us to continue to accelerate as much as we can. And so certainly want to be a partner with you in this effort, Councilmember Hucker. So thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Apple and Councilmember Rice. Councilmember Glass.
Want to commend my colleague. I think it's a smart use of taxpayer resources to do the important work that we have to do. So I'd like to be a co-sponsor.
So Member Albornoz.
The bill makes a lot of sense, and thank you, Councilmember Hucker, for your leadership on this. I'd like to be a co-sponsor as well.
Excellent. Okay, now on to item 5. This is Bill 35-18, Health and Sanitation, Smoking, Outdoor Serving Areas. HHS Committee recommends enactment as amended. So I will turn it over to the chair of the HHS Committee, Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank my colleagues on the committee for your patience as I work through my first assignment as committee chair, and also want to commend Councilmember Katz for the introduction of this bill and all of the advocates that work to promote it and support it. There obviously is nothing more important in our community than our overall public health. And we did have a robust conversation regarding the bill that ended in adding 2 amendments, which I thought reasonably addressed the legitimate concerns raised by some of our local small businesses who felt that this would disproportionately impact their ability to operate those establishments. And we agreed with those concerns. And so the 2 amendments provided, one was to specifically exempt balconies and rooftop seating areas, which represent a very small number of restaurants in the county. And so those restaurants that do have those unique amenities would be exempted from this bill. And one of the reasons that we chose to go down this road isn't just because of the economic impact, which was proven to us, but also these are destination spots within restaurants. You typically don't have to pass through them to get to other seating areas, which would then minimize the impact of secondhand smoke on potential patrons, and people can choose to go to those particular areas within restaurants, and those are important to overall nighttime economy, which is important as a whole to the county. We also provided an amendment to golf courses. There's obviously a unique nature in the overall operation of golf courses, and so we provided an amendment to provide some relief for those golf courses. But I think this undeniably advances our overall public health in Montgomery County. It's a giant leap forward to ensuring that important cause, and I want to thank my colleagues for their support of this bill and their 3-0 vote.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I too am pleased that the council will be voting on this legislation today, both as a legislation and as Board of Health. The ultimate goal is to obviously protect residents from the health impacts of smoking and secondhand smoke. Prohibiting smoking in outdoor seating areas provides for a healthier environment for everyone. Both Rockville and Gaithersburg have already enacted similar outdoor smoking bans. It's interesting to note that more than 300 jurisdictions also across the United States also have smoke-free outdoor dining laws. And I'd like to thank Adam Zimmerman, who's in the audience, and all who have testified and discussed this with us, both in favor and those who wanted us to hear their concerns and give their suggestions, and amendments were made. This will lead to a healthier Montgomery County. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I really want to thank the lead sponsor, Councilmember Katz, for not only his leadership in terms of promoting this health initiative, but also being understanding and open to working with our chambers and our businesses to make sure we reached a collaborative agreement that really furthered our mission, but didn't harm businesses who continue to struggle every day here in Montgomery County and throughout the metropolitan area. This is a great compromise, and it's a fine example of what happens when we all can sit together and talk about what we want to promote here in the county, but also understand some of the challenges that businesses face as well. And I hope this is a model for what we continue to do here in Montgomery County. Oftentimes we're painted with this picture of being anti-business, but this is a shining example of where we rolled up our sleeves and worked together with business to come up with a compromise proposal that makes sense for everyone. And so for that, I really want to thank our lead sponsor and my Health and Human Services Committee. Thank you.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. This has been a really interesting and personal debate for me regarding this legislation. I come at it from two vantage points. First, growing up in a household with a single mom who worked 2 jobs and was a lifelong smoker. And my mother died at the age of 53 because of lung cancer. And so I understand the impacts that smoking has on all of us. And on the other hand, I was a member of the Montgomery County Nighttime Economy Task Force and understand that we need to encourage nightlife here, and that places like downtown Silver Spring, parts of Bethesda, and a few other areas like Wheaton do have thriving nighttime economies, and we don't want to discourage that. And so where I found myself was accepting the balance that was struck in this bill, recognizing that patios and certain outdoor spaces can accommodate the nighttime economy that we need and that I like having here in the community, and coming to the honest reality that I'm probably not going to be visiting the businesses that allow smoking, and that's my choice. And for those who want to have thriving nightlife and smoke and hang out with their friends, that is their choice. And I think this bill strikes a balance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is a roll call vote.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Albornoz? Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice? Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson? Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Katz? Mr. Katz votes yes. Ms. Navarro? Ms. Navarro votes yes.
And if the council
It's
member
unanimous.
today would like to vote, this could be a 10-0 vote right here. the
All
first
right,
one.
it's a 10-0. Okay, so now we're on, we're going to now act as Board of Health. So we have an action, resolution to adopt Bill 35-18, Health and Sanitation Smoking Outdoor Serving Areas as a Board of Health regulation. And the HHS Committee recommends approval. I don't see any lights, so all those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous among us.
Thank you all very
Excellent.
much.
Thank you, Council Vice President Katz. So now we're going to move on to a discussion on workforce development continuum. And I believe Mr. Gene Smith is a staff member for this item. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so this, I think this item, we had actually rescheduled, and I wanted to just set the context for this conversation. I know that especially throughout all of last year, as everyone was involved in a lot of discussions in the community as there was a campaign going on, this issue of workforce development, I know, kept coming up time and time again, and it was always tied to the desire for county residents, as well as those of us who were running to be in these leadership positions, to find a way to obviously be very intentional and align workforce development to our ultimate goal of economic development, as well as economic sustainability and expanding the tax base. We are all very aware that resources are limited, while a lot of our needs continue to grow. And we're also very aware that Montgomery County has extraordinary assets that we have worked very hard to position. So through our land use decisions, we have created, I think, an ecosystem for life science, for biotech type of industries. We have also worked very hard with our fiscal policies to retain our AAA bond rating as a sign of fiscal health. We also have, I think, the fortune of a very diverse demographic that I think a lot of companies feel attracted to. You know, a county where there's high quality of life, where there is diverse demographic, where you have also diversity in geography, so you can live in, you know, quiet cul-de-sacs, you can live in urban centers, you can live in rural areas. I mean, there's just so much going for us. But there's this constant conversation about where are we going vis-a-vis our economic development strategy and our workforce development, and looking at some models throughout the country that have chosen to be very intentional in identifying, as I said, our ecosystem, and then really providing those opportunities for skill set development for those who perhaps need a different type of skill set, are young people that are seeking opportunities for jobs right away, but also positioning them for those jobs of the future, as well as those very specialized industries that need, you know, workforce. And so I thought that it would be, you know, appropriate for us to engage in an overall conversation about this, knowing that maybe there can be some follow-ups that the Joint Committee of Education, Culture, and Public Housing and Economic Development can take on. But I specifically wanted this to be, you know, titled Workforce Development Continuum, because it is important to highlight that. I think oftentimes we don't really know what we're talking about, you know. There are folks who may be thinking about those who have a hard time finding jobs, or our youth that is disconnected and needs jobs, or are we talking about the very highly specialized jobs? And in reality, we're talking about a continuum. We cannot do one thing and leave another. And so under that context, I just wanted to have this opportunity for this discussion. And again, just remind my colleagues, because I know I've had conversations with every single one of you about, what is it that we can then do to realize this vision of this continuum, to hold ourselves accountable, to be able to demonstrate some outcomes, and really, truly, not just focus on one geographic area of the county that has been neglected, but understand that it's like whack-a-mole, like we have to do it all. And so, no easy charge here, but I think we're all up to the challenge because we all bring to this an interest, I think, and an expertise. So with that, what we'll do is I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith, who's prepared a packet, and then I'll turn it over to WorkSource Montgomery to tell us what's been going on, and then we'll open it up for conversation. Mr. Smith, and thank you, Mr. Smith, also for preparing the packet and coordinating this particular discussion.
Anytime. And as the council president said, I'm joined here by WorkSource Montgomery today, both the CEO and board members. So before I get started, I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves so we all know who's here. And then once they introduce themselves, I'll go through the packet, hit some highlights. So.
Good morning. I'm Ellie Giles. I'm the CEO at WorkSource Montgomery. And Nancy, thank you so much for eloquently setting this up. I thought your opening statement was excellent. So.
Excuse me. My name is Ted Rose. I'm the chair of WorkSource Montgomery.
And I'm Dawn Wegline, and I am the treasurer of WorkSource Montgomery, and I'm with Educational Systems Federal Credit Union.
I'm new to this. Hi, Gordon Ellis, Vice Chair, and I work for Sodexo.
Hi, I'm Erin Allen. I chair the Governance Committee, and I'm with Contemporaries.
Thank you.
So, and I'm appreciative. We worked a lot to focus on this, and we chose to talk with WorkSource first. Although there's a lot of entities involved in the system, WorkSource is the county's workforce development corporation. They've been charged to implement the county's policies in workforce development. So it seemed apropos to start here, and then, as Ms. Navarro said, figure out where to go in other committees. So some quick highlights in the memo. The first portion of it is just to define the system. It's a rather large system. There's a lot of entities, a lot of players, and a lot of funding involved. I put them into four main groupings just for us to kind of understand. I mean, there are educational institutions doing training and skill development there. There are employers. Ultimately, we want our residents to have jobs, but we need employers to create jobs, and so we need to know what types of jobs we have in our local county and our local ecosystem. There's the government across all sectors, federal, state, and local, that's funding this. And obviously, there are nonprofits providing barrier support, intensive support, workforce development and training, and job placement. And by one count, WorkSource had information provided an update from a 2015 report that suggested that public funding from federal, state, and local is $139 million in the county to support this system. That number is a guesstimate, I think, in terms of staff's interpretation, but it's a rather large number when you look across how much money is funding workforce development in the county. Could be a little higher, could be a little lower, but that's still a substantial amount of public funding and not even private funding that goes to nonprofits and other institutions. The system is rather porous. There's no one place to get into the system. There's also lots of places that people may fall out of the system. Because there's a lot of places where people need to move through the continuum of services. There's not just a show up to one place, get a job, and we're done. And there's a lot of places that have to be connected through referrals and through interpersonal relationships and being able to understand how an individual will get the needs they need in one place, then may need to go to another place where that funding and program can continue, or to a different funding and program because of a different set of needs. And the county has recognized this problem, and that was a lot of the conversation that occurred prior to this council through 2015 when the county was considering privatization of economic development and workforce development. And in 2015 there was a report, and I listed an excerpt of a list that report said on page 3 in terms of some ways that the county can improve the workforce development system, including employer engagement, broader efforts to integrate the system, considering all the entities that are involved, more career pathways, so we're not just creating jobs, but we're creating pathways and career and self-sustaining jobs, and also just where the funding and outcome data is. How do we make sure the system is working efficiently, and that the county, at least in the money that they're considering in the funding, how do we connect those dots and not just try to plug in more money in certain ways and hope it reaches a certain outcome. So with this information in hand, the county decided to privatize economic development in 2015. They did it in two ways. And for workforce development, they created the Workforce Development Corporation and designated WorkSource Montgomery as the county's workforce development organization to implement its policies and to also implement the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funding, which is a federally mandated program that goes with our American Job Centers. So with that in hand, WorkSource began operations in 2016. And the county began funding it in fiscal year 17, so the 2016-2017 timeframe. So we're concluding year 3 of this journey, and on page 6 to 7, I have highlighted some of the outcomes. I believe the WorkSource will highlight more outcomes today. And staff just notes that a lot of the outcomes that are highlighted there are direct responses to the 2015 report and the ways that we need to improve the system through employer engagement. And so WorkSource has done a lot to engage the employers to understand what services they need so that as residents get into the system, they're getting jobs that are not only sustainable, but that are jobs that are in the county. They've created new career pathways, at least 10, through partnerships with industry. So again, that we have pathways for individuals. And they're trying to expand access to the system. So one of those ways is through the East County and also through other pop-up centers around libraries. How do you help more people get into the system? Under DED, the primary way to get into the system was to show up at the American Job Center, but that's a very limited bandwidth for our residents. And obviously that's only in one area in the county that they can show up. And then finally, WorkSource was implementing the WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act federally mandated programming, which also is linked to the American Job Centers, and that is a large portion of their budget, and it's a large portion of their time spent on that. So even with these outcomes, I think per the council president's conversation, staff was charged to come up with some discussion topics for today. I'll put those into two camps, very hyper-focused, specific. Those are related both to the American Job Center. The state has released its first report related to WIOA funding in January 2019. However, that is a 2-year lag. It's for performance year 17, which is also another lag. It's for data that was collected during our county fiscal year 17, so July of 2016 to June of 2017. So, but that's the first report we have, and I think it's important to understand, as we see in that report, there's some compliance issues. How is WorkSource not only meeting the standards that the state has set, but how are they improving upon them? Second, it's easy to talk about the system in general. One of the areas the county has almost entire control over is our ex-offender population. So we have a job center in the Department's corrections facility. And how are we connecting those individuals to jobs as they come out of the center? And so I thought that would be a really hyper-focus for the council to discuss today. I believe that will be, again, a foundational conversation, not necessarily that will lead to additional committee discussion, because we're not going to talk about funding and all of that today, but I think it gives a way to hyper-focus that conversation. And then there's other areas. The other bucket is just more general. How do we continue to integrate the system? And one area I also want to focus on is data. We still have a lot of different entities doing this. Each are reporting the programs and funding that are important to them, but it's, at least from my vantage point as staff trying to put this together, it's unclear how that all is, again, fixed together and working to make an efficient system so that our residents, as they go through the continuum, are getting what they need. So with that, I will turn it over to WorkSource for them to give a few minutes of highlights that they wish to share, and then we'll go back to the council.
Thank you, Gene. That was very helpful. Thank you, Madam President. Your introduction was also very helpful. Again, my name is Ted Rose. I'm the chair of WorkSource Montgomery. I grew up in Montgomery County. I've run a business here for 25 years. Currently employ 50 employees. I have been volunteering to support the workforce effort for over 10 years, dating back to when WorkSource Montgomery was called the WIB. Some of you may remember that. Again, thank you for taking the time to focus on Montgomery County's workforce system. We all know that this is a critical issue that's facing Montgomery County residents. We are here to answer your questions related to Montgomery County's workforce system, and I appreciate your indulgence while I provide you a brief summary of WorkSource Montgomery's activities and plans, really to answer some of the questions that Gene has posed here. First thing is WorkSource Montgomery has taken responsibility for convening the workforce system in Montgomery County. While we've had many accomplishments in the past 2.5 years, since WorkSource Montgomery's founding, today's presentation is about our plans to continue to improve Montgomery County's residents' access to job and career opportunities and the business's access to a qualified and trained workforce. WorkSource Montgomery has identified and begun the process of implementing the following strategic steps towards convening and creating an integrated and collaborative workforce system in Montgomery County. We are identifying and building relationships with entities contributing to the workforce system. We are mapping these services and capacities of these entities. We are working to increase access and on-ramps to the workforce system. And we are improving our own performance, customer service, and accountability. The current initiatives that are underway at WorkSource Montgomery include a comprehensive mapping of Montgomery County's workforce system and the service offerings and capacities of our available community partners. We've commissioned a study by SkillSmart that identified that Montgomery County's fiscal year 19 budget includes funding of $139 million towards its workforce system. Should be noted that WorkSource Montgomery's budget is about $5.5 million, or approximately 3.9% of the total funding of the workforce system. We're mapping our community partners, and we're building out industry-focused career pathways. We're improving access to the workforce system through the building of a county-wide network of hire centers. HIRE stands for Helping Individuals Reach Employment. These hire centers will become the initial point of contact for county residents that come to the American Job Center or visit a designated Montgomery County library or visit a qualified WorkSource Montgomery partner. The network of hire centers will be supported by a standardized referral form, centralized CRM and outcome tracking, access to current job and career opportunities, including our career pathways, trained community partners, and access to physical space through a memo of understanding with the Montgomery County Public Libraries. WorkSource Montgomery is currently seed funding the build-out of these initial hire centers. We have 4 prototypes that are underway. They include the East County Regional Center, they include the White Oak Library, they include Praisner Library, and Rockville Library. On July 1st, we intend to open in the Wheaton American Job Center, a hire center, in the Germantown facility as well, and also in the Gaithersburg Library. Our intent is to convert the current job center in the Department of Corrections facility in Clarksburg to a hire center in the next fiscal year. We are improving relationships with community partners through increased communication, an upcoming summit, and capacity building. And we also have training memos of understanding with Montgomery College, with the Montgomery County Public School System, and the Universities of Shady Grove. Additionally, we are modernizing and improving our customer service in the flagship American Job Center in Wheaton. We are moving to new office space that will be configured to improve customer service, including the implementation of a hire center in the reception area, improved collaborations between WorkSource Montgomery and government and community partners, and improved residents' access to job and career placement support and training services. This past year, WorkSource Montgomery implemented a monthly KPI tracking system to report the American Job Center's performance levels to the Executive Committee on a monthly basis and to the board on a quarterly basis. By the time that the experimental performance levels reported by the state become mandated in 2021, WorkSource Montgomery will be in full compliance with all mandated standards. So to come to a conclusion, WorkSource Montgomery's recommendation for continued improvement of the Montgomery County workforce system is to continue to move forward on the initiatives that I've described today, to tie all Montgomery County workforce spending to collaboration with WorkSource Montgomery. That would include the use of a shared referral form, participation in sharing of best practices through routine meetings, and sharing of participant and outcome data. And additionally, we would request in the future to support any future funding requests as we build out the Hire Center network. Thank you for having us today, and we look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Anybody else who's going to present? Was that the presentation? Okay. All right. So let's open it up for conversation. Let's see. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Council President Navarro. Pleased that we're having this conversation today. I remember the former workforce development program when it was inside the Department of Economic Development. And sadly, without really trying to denigrate the work of the people who are working very hard in those jobs, it was sort of a backwater of Montgomery County government. It was underinvested in. There was not sufficient support to it, and it didn't have a very strong mission, and it wasn't really delivering. And so that was what led to the creation of a nonprofit organization that could, ideally bring more resources to the table. I think that was a fundamental goal. It wasn't just to be more nimble and to be smarter and to do things better, but also to be able to gain more resources to support the mission. We are still very much in the early stages of that. I think there's a lot of questions about how we are fulfilling the mission targeting the most disadvantaged populations. And so I think we need to hear from you on that topic. There's been a lot of very good focus on specific career pathways and industries. Often that doesn't necessarily pull people in from the very bottom rung because you have to have a certain level to get into that pathway. I think there's a balance here that we have to strike where we're both walking in, well, that's not the right analogy, but we're executing on both sides of this mission. Workforce development in terms of ensuring that companies in Montgomery County have the ability to hire the workforce that they need, and ensuring that the people who grew up here and live here have access to the jobs that we're creating. That's an essential strategy. Helping people who are struggling at the margins and are looking perhaps even for low-skilled employment is not as necessarily correlated with an economic development, corporate growth strategy, but it is a social justice mission as well. And we need to be able to deliver on all of that. We had a terrific discussion in early January about an initiative that I would really like to see us explore around the tech talent pipeline concept, which is the tech talent pipeline model is one that really was developed in New York and brings industry and higher education institutions together. And I think we could do a lot there as the tech economy is growing in the Washington region. We need to ensure that we diversify our workforce pipeline so that kids from any zip code in Montgomery County are able to get on that path to get those jobs, here in the county and in the region. And we need to ensure that companies that want to locate here can feel confident that they're going to be able to get access to the workforce that they need. And those are really imperatives. That's the twin imperative of this topic. So I think there's a lot of, I love the libraries initiative. I think that is just absolutely a perfect example of multi-use of facilities. When you go into a library, that's what you see anyway. We should recognize the reality, which is a lot of people there are using those computers looking for jobs. So the extent to that we can be there providing some value to them in that pursuit, I think is so important. But in any event, I think it's a good conversation, and we'll be able to take up budget issues, of course, as we get into that conversation later this spring. But we will return to this tech talent pipeline conversation as soon as we can as well.
Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President. I kind of heard a question about the underserved. I don't know if someone wants to answer that before I start, but.
I would love to respond to that. And I think one of the things that both Nancy said in her discussion of Continuum, as well as what Ted talked about as we talk about the system, is exactly that. We're trying to create that system so that we are able to serve all of Montgomery County. And that's really where we're working through increasing those accesses, understanding where there are services for barrier support, and how do we better coordinate that? Where are those services for the training? The tech is a perfect example where we're working going into the school system and talking about getting kids ready in that pipeline as we move forward. And that preparation moving forward and working in a coordination with all of the nonprofits, community-based services to provide those barrier supports, moving in a seamless continuum to the training and to the job placement and the follow-up is exactly what we're trying to create here.
I just want to add one point. The $139 million that is being designated towards workforce system, of that, $55 million is designated towards barrier supports, and $74 million is designated towards training. And I think what we've heard and what we've seen is that there's a lack of coordination, between all of the parties that are involved. We're in the early stages of bringing this together, and again, we're committed to being the convener of the workforce system, and we're moving towards creating a system that where we're breaking down the silos between between all of our partners.
Thank you. A couple of questions here. I was looking at the mission of WorkSource Montgomery. Helps businesses succeed through workforce services by meeting the talent attraction, development, and retention needs of strategic industries, which you discussed. And the second bullet says meeting the needs of the underemployed and the unemployed. Would that include, in your opinion, formerly incarcerated or folks reentering society? Ms. Giles?
Absolutely, yes.
And you all also manage the contractor in the jail that provides workforce services, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. As council staff mentioned, there is some concern from me and I think other colleagues about the level of service that's happening with this very vulnerable population. I want to focus in on there for a second. My understanding, and I actually experienced this in a previous job, was that we were really at the front years ago in 2006 when we designed workforce systems inside our jail and really focused on education and training as a key component of reentering society. And in fact, in 2016, President Obama acknowledged our program as one of those that was a really good program in trying to reentry. And one of the key factors in our program, which was later used as a basis to do a federal grant called a LEAP grant, was this warm handoff that happens between the folks inside the jail that are helping folks that are incarcerated to a workforce specialist on the outside. It's my understanding that that component is no longer happening. Could you comment on that?
So that's incorrect. There is a individual in the job center that is designated to work with that warm handoff. We go both to work with corrections as well as we work with the pre-release center to do that handoff. And we have many programs within the job center to best support those reentry individuals.
So every person who's incarcerated now is the same person that works with them inside is working with them on the outside?
No. So that would be what we do. We have a person in our job center that's designated to meet them upon release in the community. We're working to improve the communication from inside corrections to the job center, but we do have systems in place for that.
How are you working to improve that communication?
We have now met with them, and we're asking them, as employees of WorkSource Montgomery, to start to attend all of our staff meetings so that they know what is going on. We have a newsletter that goes out with opportunities that they're a part of in the distribution list, and we've had multiple communications with Chief Green.
And I also was looking at you currently, I think the public comment closes today on a vision for 2018 through 2023, your strategic plan. Is that
That's correct?
Is there a reason that formerly incarcerated or reentering individuals are not listed in the plan at all?
It should be in there. There should be.
No, I have it here. I don't see them.
Okay, I could go back. There is definitely an area of priority. I think that our caution is that we need to be really careful about which funding source is supporting that.
And what do you mean by that?
In our WIOA funding right now, that is a question as to whether or not we can fund services in the jail, because WIOA services serve individuals that are eligible for the services, not a program. So we're looking at alternative, and we have been looking at alternative funding for that. We went out the last 2 years. I went and applied for grants to better support their program, and we are looking at other ways that we can better support behind the wall services, but we have full-fledged services as we re-enter into the community.
I would recommend you work with our Attorney General to get a ruling on that. My understanding, I worked on WIOA and WIA the previous when I was in the Senate, and I know many jurisdictions do use those dollars for incarcerated and reentering of individuals, and I just think that might be a way of helping you as you try to work with that transition, because that connection is so important. Knowing the person, you're incarcerated, you're at a vulnerable time, and then just being kind of maybe connected to another person you don't know at the end, that can be a difficult thing, and I think we need to have better integration there. Go ahead.
Thank you. One thing I just want to clarify, and that is that the difference between the American Job Center and what we're now calling the Hire Center, helping individuals reach employment. There's a different. The American Job Center service centers are for WIOA grants serving eligible job seekers. All services are restricted by WIOA regulations. So there's an intensive amount of training that goes into the individuals to focus on whether we can provide service or whether we can't provide service. That's the lens at which they look at the world. The Hire Center is going to be a different set of employees, a different set of population that we can train in a different way to look at what can we do to help these individuals. Not are they eligible to be helped, but what can we do to help these individuals? That's the lens at which we will be implementing on July 1st in the American Job Center in Wheaton. We've put out an RFP, and we're bringing on a one-stop operator to run the American Job Center in Wheaton, and those individuals, as part of that agreement, will be trained to look at everyone entering the American Job Center in a different lens. They're going to be entering the Hire Center, and we're going to be looking at what can we do to help them. And there's really three things that they're going to be trained to do. They're going to be trained to look at, are they employee ready? Are they employment ready? Mm-hmm. And really, from a WIOA perspective, that's are they within 2 to 3 months of employment? If they're not, the question's going to be, is there training that we can offer them through our training partners? Are there barrier supports that we can offer them through our partners? Or are they employee ready, where we can provide them a referral into the American Job Center where they'll be received and be given the career counseling that they'll need? Or if they are ready, they'll be referred into our career pathways or available jobs and opportunities that exist. Okay. So this is a fundamental shift in how we're going to be operating moving forward, including in the Department of Corrections.
I appreciate that. And just two other questions, shifting briefly to the compliance issues with the state WIOA funding that flows through the state to the county to WorkSource and is your primary pot. Could you address that, how you're fixing those issues and some of the things that you've changed internally to be more compliant? Could you generally comment on that?
So absolutely, I appreciate the question. The data that you are referring to, as Jean had indicated, is data from 2016. So that data does not best reflect who we are today. But we did recognize as we moved in that transition that the vendor that was brought on board to run that job center was not efficient. We have replaced that vendor with a new vendor who has been much more productive and successful. We have put in place now this one-stop operator that we're going to be doing. We have enhanced the job centers. We have a huge new customer focus perspective that we have in alignment with our new customer flow within the job center. So we've improved a lot. The other piece that we're doing, and I think the accountability is really important, is that the data that is required through the state is lagging data. We really felt that that didn't provide and inform us with how do we do continuous improvement. So we've created our own system. We collect leading indicators. We report on it every month with the executive committee to make sure that we have ongoing discussions about continuous improvement.
I want to focus briefly on two specific things, and I have this letter from my colleagues that my staff will pass out. On April 23rd, 2018, County Executive Leggett, so this is about 11 months ago, wrote the Department of Labor for the state asking about the challenges that the county has had meeting performance requirements under the WIOA grant. And then Assistant Secretary Respecki, and now Acting Director, wrote a detailed letter detailing several things, 8 things in particular, which are in this letter in front of you, identifying the concerns that they had with WorkSource's WIOA compliance. And they met with you, which I'm sure you remember. And a couple of things on here stuck out to me that were very concerning. We're less about the lagging data, but more about internal functions at WorkSource and how you reported and related to the data. If you look at number 2, poor customer service delivery in the adult and dislocated worker program was exhibited through several complaints received at the state central office. And I know you mentioned the contractor, so maybe that's part of that. But number 4 in particular, lack of communication between the WSM leadership and existing vendors has created a lack of control of customer flow within the American Job Center. Monitoring interviews with staff revealed a lack of understanding of state and local policy, as well as federal guidance around Title I. And then finally, number 6, lack of communication between program and accounting. And they said this was evident when WSM staff was interviewed. Staff has a misconception of federal grant management and policies. That, to me, is a kind way of saying people at WSM did not understand the grant program and were not communicating with the vendor, which is the responsibility and the coordination role. And I would really have some concern, no matter what the reporting period was and who the vendor is, if those things were happening. And I want to know your comment about, is that true? And why is that happening? And what have you done to fix it if it was happening?
So the letter that is written here was a letter that expressed a lot of concern for WorkSource Montgomery. We've met with the state. We've done a direct response to all of that. We have updated all of the policies. We continue to communicate all of our policies. And I feel very strongly that our team understands and is in compliance with all the policy statements within WIOA. Changing the vendors was a very big step in moving in that right direction. A lot of the communication was about that lack and that of organization and moving up. We've ramped up to a point now that we have a comprehensive staff that addresses all of those issues. And if you go back now and ask the state, there has been no complaints in the last year.
So this, in the last 11 months since this letter was written, all that's happened?
All that has happened.
My office, we met with now Director Respecki, and who gave us this information, and that was not the impression I got from the meeting. The last thing I want to say, and I'll pass it on to my colleagues, is there was another site inspection done on October 10th, 2018, so here we're talking just a few months ago, about some data that was deleted from your file, 42 records that were deleted just prior to an October reporting related to WIOA compliance. And in this report, because there was such a dramatic deletion, it triggered a review by the State Department of Labor to see if those services had actually been provided to those deleted. And one of the things in the review, when they reviewed, is they cited an uneven impact of the data changes, suggesting that those who were deleted were majority people who had not had a good employment outcome, which would have the short-term effect of boosting performance data on that next report. And they recommended that WSM closely review those cases cited above because evidence of service had been provided to some level of those folks, because deletions will be warranted if they did not receive service, but they found in their review that some did receive some level of service. So could you comment on that? Because to me, that sounds like there was a potential cooking of the books for short-term gain.
So the way that we had worked with the WIOA partners and all of the data, we went back immediately when we had the very first Christmas tree in and reviewed every file that was in the job center. Files that were enrolled in WIOA and no services were provided, we reached out, we want you back postcards to try to re-engage those customers. We made numerous phone calls, and in every record there was documentation of trying to re-engage the individuals that we lost in the transition from public to private. And those individuals that we did not or could not re-engage were the only files that we eliminated out of the WIOA process. There wasn't one deletion that wasn't done in cooperation with Dollar. We didn't do this independent. We did this with the Department of Labor in consultation for every folder.
All right, well, I appreciate the answers. I'm very concerned about these issues, which I brought up, which were not mentioned in any of the openings, and are serious issues about compliance with the major funding stream of this money. And if we're coordinating the workforce system countywide, and that's the role of WorkSource Montgomery, we need to be doing a better job in these areas, frankly. So I appreciate your answers.
So I'd like to just add a couple more points to this. The first thing is that we have engaged the largest local CPA firm, Aronson, to do a full audit of our books this past fiscal year. The report has come out, and we have no material or other control weaknesses within the system. So we had a full positive review of the books this past year, and we passed. The second point I want to make is that there's a misconception about the Christmas tree report. Back when I was at the WIB, that was the report card for WorkSource Montgomery, or I'm sorry, for the actual Workforce Investment Board. In those years, compliance was based upon those, that report. But right now, when WIOA changed over, these measures are now experimental, and the Department of Labor is trying to calibrate their system of reporting. So there is no requirement that we comply with those measures. We are working with them to comply. But there is no mandated compliance. The compliance will be mandated in approximately 2021. It was supposed to occur this next year. They've delayed it 2 additional years. So we are not out of compliance with any mandated rules or regulations related to the WIOA funding. So we had no incentive to change these accordingly. Essentially, we're trying to get the books correct so that we are positioned for success when it is mandated in 2021.
Well, I appreciate that. I think the incentive is to make sure we're serving all populations, like our reentering, like our youth, and making sure that we are at our own standard of achieving. And I think when you have some of these things that I cited about internal controls by WorkSource staff, they're concerning to me and have nothing to do really whether we're meeting the goals or not. They're just basic understanding questions, and these are, again, reports from the state. So I appreciate your answer, and I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. I want to follow up, I guess, something similar, just some notes that I have from feedback that I have received. So I had received this information that said that clients enlisting into WIOA in the later part of the fiscal year have little to no access to resources. It is unclear how the up to $5,000 per client budget is being used and how this can be leveraged to support skills building and supporting a portable and stackable system for low skill and low educated residents. And then it goes to say, currently initial screening is done by the Department of Labor, Licensing and Regulation, DLLR staff at one-stop centers, and then the client is handed off to WorkSource Montgomery. But the clients not accepted by WorkSource Montgomery are sent back to DLLR staff. Tracking for those clients does not occur, and often they fall off the job readiness, job skill, job-seeking cliff. So I'm just wondering, if that's the case, how do we track those clients, and why are they falling short of Workforce Montgomery assessment and acceptance, and then what happens to them? How do we respond?
So that statement is not correct. I appreciate you having given me a chance to correct that. So
Sure.
when an individual walks into the American Job Center, which is this service center for WIOA services, the first step is that they are met by the dollar staff to do what we call general kinds of services, assess them to see are they needing resume help or job searching. If it looks like their needs are more intense, then they are referred to WIOA service providers in the job center. And that is where that process begins. If they do not qualify for WIOA, our goal and what we are put in place right now is to then make those referrals to the appropriate partner organizations that we have within the job center. We have begun to do more and more of that tracking, and part of that is using that similar referral form, being able to have the case notes better reflect by having increased communications from what our partners are. But our goal is not to have anybody walk out unserviced. The reason why we want to bring in the higher program is because we don't have the restriction of just looking at eligibility moving forward, and that's part of where the system of WIOA restricts helping all, and we've really put in place lots of strategies to do that, where now we're going to be doing not only having it within the job centers, but making sure that there's access across the whole county.
And do you have a memorandum of understanding with other partners in order to kind
Absolutely.
of provide that kind of case
yes,
management so that doesn't?
Yes, so we have MOUs with multiple partners.
Mhm.
We've also identified levels of partners that are WIOA mandated, but also now we're moving forward to partners that have been in the workforce space and are scalable across the county and have had good dialogue with them, and we'll be continuing to do outreach with other nonprofits.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you all for being here and for the briefing. And thank you for your focus on East County, which you made a commitment to, well over a year ago. I continue to believe I appreciate everything you're doing with the pop-up centers and the libraries. I believed at the time when the East County Opportunity Zone was created that we really needed to not sort of do it on the cheap, but really to have a permanent location that job seekers could go to reliably, in addition to the pop-up centers and the libraries. And I agree with everything Councilmember Reamer said about the use of libraries in today's workforce. But I still believe we need a permanent site for that, and I hope you agree with that. Thank you for partnering with my office on the East County Job Fair, as well as the District 14 delegation and Congressman Sarbanes. We had about 60 employers this year and about 500 job seekers over the last 2 years. Has Workforce Montgomery done any analysis to determine how many of those job seekers have been hired?
Yes, I cannot get you that number right, Dave, but I'd be happy to do that. But we did go back. We have, upon registration, we did go back and talk with those individuals that came and attended that job fair. On another positive note is that there's a brand new hotel opening up in Burtonsville.
Mm-hmm.
Last week we did a job fair for that hotel, and there was over 100 job seekers that showed up. And my understanding is that they were able to fill all of the positions for that hotel.
Great. And there'll be one in Hillendale soon.
Yeah,
that
good.
you're
We'll be ready for them.
Equally focused on. Councilmember Joando's question reminded me, I know it's not your job to police compliance with this law, but you see a lot of job applicants and a lot of job applications. What's your anecdotal sense of how well employers are complying with the ban the box legislation the county passed a few years ago?
My understanding at this point is that they're in total compliance with the ban the box. I haven't had any job seekers come back to us and say that that was a question that was asked previous to going in for an interview or for a job seeker.
You never see that included on any job applications?
No, I have not seen that.
I appreciate what Mr. Smith said about the importance of pathways. On the topic of green jobs, we know there are thousands of middle-skilled jobs that don't require a college degree going unfilled, focused on installing solar panels, upgrading communication technology, building energy storage capacity, increasing climate resiliency, and we enjoyed partnering with you last year to pass the Green Jobs Apprenticeship Program, which the council approved unanimously, and then Councilmember Elrich and the council vice president and president co-sponsored, which charged Workforce Montgomery with standing up this Green Jobs Apprenticeship Program to help job seekers access these unfilled jobs and apply for an earned grant to help pay for it. How's that going?
So where we are with that, and I'm excited to say that we have met with the electrician contract group. They have already a registered apprenticeship in the state of Maryland, which has a lot of opportunities within that pathway. So we will be launching that probably in the spring. And we're having our final meeting next week to begin that pathway from Green's Construction's perspective. The earn grant cycle has not happened yet, so to apply for an earn grant in that category, but we have, as you know, multiple other earn grants in different industry sectors.
Right, you will apply for an earned grant as soon as possible in this
when
area.
that cycle is open.
And what's the electrician grant group you're working with?
It's called IEC. It's the International Electrical Contractors Group.
Okay, have you worked with the Washington, D.C. area building trades that also supported that legislation?
I have not worked with them, but I will reach out to them.
I would try to reach out because it was my understanding they said they hadn't heard from you in a while. And could you comment a little bit? I saw the Green Infrastructure Certification Program as one of the 10 pathways. What's the status of that? How many job seekers have been engaged through that?
So that was a really exciting partnership that we did for stormwater management, and that whole goal was to have them work with DC Public Works. They came up with a certification for stormwater management and environmental certification. We helped with the recruiting of that. The Environmental Protection Group did the actual training and placement. And I'm not sure.
You know which group that was?
That was the DEP here in Montgomery County.
Our DEP.
Yeah. And worked with Montgomery College for that training. And they had 2 cohorts that went through, and then they made a decision to suspend that program on the short term. Just recently, the Council of Governments put out a new stormwater management report that talked about the need and the desire to move forward on this again, which I have forwarded to some of you as well as to the county executive to see what we can do to reactivate this. There's lots and lots of jobs in this area.
Glad to hear your commitment, and I hope we can work together to redouble your efforts this year on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually am the next speaker, even though it looks like I just decided to jump in here. But thank you all very much for being here this morning. I want to focus a little bit more, and of course, Councilmember Jawando and others have brought this to your attention as well. I'm very concerned about the inside the jail center, the American Job Center that's inside the jail. I heard you say that you want to change it to a hire center. And I want to know whether or not, while you're converting it over, what's going to happen to the American Job Center? Is there going to be a continuum of care in there?
So I believe that having it be a higher program opens the door much wider for the individuals that are inside the wall as they're preparing for job services. Right now, as it's set up as an American Job Center, what it says is that the individuals will get trained and be placed in a position, which is not something that they're eligible to do, because being behind the wall, they are not available for training. They're not available to go for job interviews. Putting it in as a higher program, I think, then starts to talk with how do we get them set up for good interviews? What is it going to take when they're out and they're ready to make those connections to employment? I believe that creating it in as a higher program, helping individuals reach employment, makes it a much wider scope and provides the services that will be helpful, as well as leads a much cleaner referral process as they're in the community and reaching out to them.
And I appreciate all of that, but my question is, what are you doing while you're converting it over from the American Job Center to the Hire Center? Or is there going to be people inside the jail that are going to be able to help the people that need the help.
So, all right, so currently, the 2 employees that are in the jail are WorkSource Montgomery employees.
Will they continue to be there while you're converting it over?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so now you have 2 employees in there, but that's a lower number than you've had before. Is that correct?
That's the number that, since I've been the CEO.
That you've always had. It has not been reduced at all?
I think there was one part-time person that was in the community that worked at the job center, but that was that very first year, and that was it.
Okay. Of course, I'm also concerned, and it was brought up before about not that this has to do with the inside the jail concern, but the disconnected youth, how we're going to engage the disconnected youth and with employment. I think that's something that we need to absolutely address. I also am concerned about the best practices that we're doing. I appreciate that the higher centers might be a better idea, and I appreciate that. But I'm concerned to make certain that it is a better idea. And of course, employment is a great help for people not to get inside a jail, to be incarcerated. Employment gives them a better life, and certainly we need to do that. I believe that we absolutely need the data to give us true numbers, how many people we are actually helping find employment. And that's not just from people who have an academic resume, but for people that need career education. I mean, we need to make certain that every person that wants employment, and we have a 3.2 unemployment rate in Montgomery County, and that's something that we should be very proud of. But that also means that the people who are looking, the people who have a job can certainly find people if we have these numbers. The fact that we're paying, that the tax dollars are $139 million, and I understand that's not every dime that you're getting, but $139 million. I'd like to know how many people we've actually helped with that money. I'd like to know how we track it, that if we help them once and they don't work out for that job, the first job, which at times happens, how many times we have helped those people, how many individuals, how many unique people have come to us for help. $139 million is a huge number, and we have got to make certain that that investment is an investment that we're actually helping the person that needs the help. And then I also think that we need to get back into the idea that if we're helping people, and I applaud everybody that we're helping, but if we're helping people in some cases who it's easier for them to find a job, they certainly should be, helped. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I want to know, like has been pointed out before, how many people that it really is difficult for them to find a job, that for whatever reason, they don't have the education, they don't have the certification, for whatever reason, how are we getting that person from an unemployed status to an employed status and to find a good job as well? I think that we need to make certain that we are doing the best job that we can do with the huge amount of money that we're spending. Thank you for all that you do.
I totally agree. I just want to make a couple comments because you had a lot there to unpack. The reason why we did this survey and we engaged SkillSmart to find this out was it was a follow-up to the original report they put out when we first were formed. And we wanted to be sure that we knew where those resources were. And one of the things that we really made a commitment to was to convene these organizations. That means that there's shared data, there's ongoing communication. Key to all of this is understanding what is job ready as determined by the industry. The industry says these are the credentials we're looking for, and trickling it down to making sure that the trainers are providing that, making sure that anybody who's preparing understands what is the end game of what is the criteria of the employers. So that communication is just critical, and that's one of the reasons why we want to take on that responsibility. I do want to also talk about the disconnected youth because I think that we do have under WIOA a program, but again, that's not going to be enough. WIOA funds. So we, as you know, did Summer Rise for 2 summers to talk about career pathway for in-school youth. We felt it was really important to move on to providing summer program for our disconnected youth. So this summer we put out a request for information, and to our nonprofits that are already in that space working with disconnected youth. Let them be the experts. We want to leverage that expertise. We're only going to award a grant to one group, but there was such great response, we really wanted to support more. So we are supporting 3 different nonprofits this summer that are directly addressing disconnected youth in jobs programs. And they include working with CASA, and they're coming up with a program to work with 25 disconnected youth through job readiness and internships. We're working with LAYC and Identity together. They put in a proposal that they're going to be creating a job training program and a work experience program that will lead to some hiring. And we also set up a program with Arts on the Block that is going to be setting up a studio apprenticeship program. So we're very excited about our reach changing, and in total that's going to be about 75 to 80 youth that will be serving that are disconnected that would have not had that opportunity. Simultaneously, the school system has done an excellent job of taking over the Summer Rise program.
Thank
you. I just want to add one point. In my original recommendations following my introduction, one of the things that could help is the tying of funding to the partnership with WorkSource Montgomery moving forward to allow for that sharing of participant data and outcomes. And we do want to gather that information, and we want to track and report all of that information back to you, because the numbers that we report on the Christmas tree report are limited just to WIOA funding. The jobs program that we put together in Burtonsville, that created additional jobs that are not part of that reporting at this time.
It's not reported anywhere, you're saying? No one is doing the reporting?
We have connections with the employers, so let us know how they've been hired, but we don't have necessarily connections with the nonprofits that come and we make referrals to opportunities that we have. So we would like to be able to have agreements made, so if they're being funded, that they know that that's part of that responsibility, is that they would do that reporting.
Okay, I do hope that as we move into some committee conversations that, recommendations like, or suggestions like pulling all of the Montgomery County funds involved in workforce development and issue a request for proposal for services to serve the least skilled and most vulnerable residents to support their entry into the workforce. Maybe some of the things that, that the council can consider. I do still worry a lot. I mean, when I hear those numbers that you just offered with CASA and Identity, I think it's a great effort, but it's minuscule numbers in relationship to the universe of the youth that we need to involve. And so I think at some point we may have to start considering some different models of how to do this. I mean, this current one, it's a model, but it's not the only one that we can explore. And with that $189 million, or 39, whatever it is, it's just a lot of money. So I think we may have to think a little bit differently about this. Councilmember Rice.
So I'm troubled. And the reason why I'm troubled is because I'm the council member who represents Clarksburg Jail. It's in my district. And so my phone lit up when we had the issues with the job center. Ellie, we had that conversation as I was not happy with the direction. And so I heard the line of questioning with Councilmember Jawando, and just help me to understand, because he framed it for you in a way in which said we had national leaders coming and talking about how our program was so great, why we felt we needed to change it. If you could just answer that for me simply and just help me to understand what was wrong with the program that we needed to change, what was a national model that drew the attention of Eric Holder and Tom Perez to come and tour the facility.
The actual content of how they've run that program has not changed. The only thing that has changed is that my guidance from the Department of Labor was that I could not use WIOA funds.
Can you provide us with, you keep saying that, a letter or something that actually has that documentation that says that there was a problem with how you were funding the program and that it needed to change? Because we keep hearing that as a statement. I've heard that over and over again, but I've never seen documentation from them to actually say that. So I'll leave that aside. I'll wait anxiously for that. So that being said, I think that what you heard was that the gap between the handoff, between what's happening with our center and then as they go into the field is still of concern. Ever since 2017, that handoff has not been the same since we changed the construct. And I think that's what's been most concerning to folks. And so I put that out there as that's where we are now. That's where the challenge is, and that's what we need to fix. So as Councilmember Navarro says, what are our next deliverables? What do we need to do? That's what we need to fix. That handoff is now broken and has been broken with the new contractor since 2017. We need to fix that so that we can ensure that that model works. Because here's the problem. I can tell you from Street Outreach Network and others, if we are not securing and ensuring that those folks have job skills and are attached to jobs, they're going to continue to prey on the community and do the same things because they don't know anything else. And we all know this, and that creates tremendous challenges for us and costs us tremendous amounts of money when it comes to recidivism. And so that's why it's so important for us, from more than just a social do the right thing issue, it's also a fiscal issue for us because we continue to waste money continuing to put people in this revolving door that goes in and out of Clarksburg Jail instead of fixing the problem, which is getting these folks assistance. So I'll leave that alone. I do want to talk about youth employment because, as Chloe and I were sitting here talking about this, your presentation when it came to youth was completely lost. And we were trying to figure out where in there was us talking about disconnected youth, where was it about us talking about youth employment and what we need to do. And so I'm happy that you now mentioned Summer Rise. And LAYC. I will say that if I remember correctly, LAYC funding was cut. And I work with Conservation Corps, another group that does tremendous work. And so I remember the phone call that I got, another, hey, Craig, can you help? Because we're having an issue with WorkSource and they're cutting funding for LAYC. And I'm thinking to myself, how can we have this in these very small instances where folks are doing a great job? I, again, don't have anyone calling my office saying, hey, LAYC isn't doing what they need to be doing. We need to change. We need to press the reset button and do something differently. Why do we continue to mess around with stuff that's working in our community? So tell me a little bit about what the decision was when it came to LAYC.
I think I'm going to have to answer that question because Ellie was not involved in that RFP. So that decision actually occurred before WorkSource Montgomery existed. I was tangentially involved in the RFP process. It was a RFP process that was run by Montgomery County. So Montgomery County government ran the RFP. We supported that RFP process. It went through the procurement, the standard procurement process, and the organization that was picked was Grant and Associates to fulfill that role. We do recognize the value of LAYC, and we do believe that they are a valued partner, and that's why we have agreed to fund their program this summer, and we're looking for additional opportunities to work with them moving forward.
What was the basis of why they received the contract versus LAYC?
I was, part of the final decision making. I'd have to, that was years ago, so we'd have to go back.
Could you, if you could work with council staff and get that for us, we'd love to see that, because oftentimes what I see, unfortunately, that happens in government is that we use so much evaluative criteria based on money, and somebody saying that they can come in and do the job cheaper but aren't committed to the same results, aren't committed to the community the same, nor have the same tie-ins with the community to reach the people who need it the most. And those relationships are something that stem beyond, and it's interesting that now we're going back to LAYC after stepping away from, which says to me that, well, did we make a mistake in terms of going in a different direction and now realize that we're not getting the same results? So if you could help me a little bit in understanding that as well.
Yes, the LAYC, we do believe is a great partner, a great community partner. We do want to do more, collaborate more with them. Grant and Associates has been also been a great partner in the youth program. There's lots of good outcomes that we're getting there. In fact, when we had to replace the vendor for the adult dislocated, we ended up replacing them with Grant and Associates. So we do feel like we have a great partner with Grant, and we do feel that LAYC is a great partner as well moving forward.
If you could share with us those outcomes as well, I'd love to see those and be able to analyze what those are versus what we saw with LAYC. So staff, if we could follow up on that, that would be helpful. So last and certainly not least, Summarize, which was a labor of love, and Councilmember Jawando, who headed up that program after Ellie and MCPS and myself came up with this collaborative that's there. Tell me where Summarize sits at this point.
Summarize, we are providing technical support to the school system, but we really felt like it needed to be more than just a one hit. I really feel that the Summarize program did a great job of changing that conversation about career education. And that was a gap when we first started with that. I think the school system has done a great job in that partnership, but we would love to be able to talk about career education throughout the year, and having it be part of the school system is the way to facilitate that. We have provided them with the businesses that were engaged before and all of the processes that we put in place, so that they are aware of all of the things, the marketing materials, everything that they can then go on and implement, and we have been available to support that implementation the whole time.
So with WorkSource Montgomery stepping away from Summarize and passing it off to the school system, what is WorkSource Montgomery doing when it comes to summer and teen employment?
Right,
if you could just lay out for me the programs that you currently have contracted for teen employment.
So those are those three organizations that I had spoken to before, where you have a partnership with LAYC and Identity to do an apprenticeship program. We have a partnership with CASA to do a youth work, learn, and training program, and we have a partnership with Arts on the Block to do an apprenticeship program.
And how many students participate in each of those programs?
Each one was it's approximately total about 75 to 80 students. And then, of course, throughout the summer, we'll do technical support with Summarize.
Right, but Summarize is no longer going to be housed under WorkSource Montgomery, so
That's
that will be
correct.
housed under MCPS. So essentially, we're looking at 225 students in our complete county of over 100,000 students, and tens of thousands of which are job-eligible high school students. That, in turn, is where I want to close. I completely understand where you are, Ms. Giles, when it comes to restrictions, challenges, when it comes to WIOA funding and all of those kinds of things that go into shaping the direction that you're headed in. The challenge is for us in terms of investment, what makes sense for us and what we need to focus on. When we had this conversation about raising the minimum wage, one of my biggest issues and the reason why we pushed so hard for Summarize is because I was so focused on underserved youth, primarily our youth of color, who are socioeconomically impacted, and how best to get them connected to jobs. When we see the East County and lack of movement that we have there, I know that there are nonprofits that are in the room who've actually been successful at employing and getting folks opportunities, but we haven't been able to do that within WorkSource. The question for me begs as to whether or not we need to invest in WorkSource, and if WorkSource is best equipped to do this, or whether we need to use those funds for other programs outside of that actually make that happen. I'd love to hear your thoughts as to whether or not you think that based on the limitations you have, WorkSource Montgomery is best equipped to deal when it comes to teen employment on a large scale.
I feel like when we opened and we talked about a system, it can't be WorkSource alone. It needs to be that system. We are going to take that responsibility to work within that system. But it's partnerships within the school system. It's partnership with employers that are open to working with the youth. It's partnership with the excellent community partners that are in each community, and making sure that there's that fluid process. That's exactly what we want to do and is moving forward. It's not WorkSource, it's the group, but we will definitely take that role to bring everybody together.
So it sounds to me, Ms. Giles, and again, I really appreciate your partnership with us, but it certainly sounds to me as though WorkSource Montgomery is not going to be the lead agency for us, and we need to rethink what it is in terms of our strategies moving forward. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Ms. Giles. Enjoyed our conversation and our partnerships and alliances in the past, and I do want to thank members of the board for stepping forward and volunteering your time to serve on a very important, for a very important organization. WorkSource obviously casts a very wide net, and I know it is a complex net, and many of the elements that are part of that net are out of your control. But as I appreciated you acknowledging, this work is critically important. One of the great things about becoming a council member is this perch that we have where we can meet with a number of different organizations and providers and get a unique perspective on sort of what's happening in the county. And the general sense that I get from a number of providers, which I appreciate you acknowledging, have to be partners if we're really going to address this issue of coordination and this concept of a summit to help with that coordination. There's a general sense that WorkSource is not built to address the needs, the more complex needs of a number of the clients that these providers are serving. And there were examples given of referrals that had been made and had been dropped, and bad experiences that providers had had, some of which I think are indirectly referenced through the letter provided by the state, that has damaged some of the trust between those providers and WorkSource to the point where, as I've sort of tried to amplify and talk about this concept of a summit, I'll be honest, I got a lot of eye rolls and a lot of skepticism and a lot of frustration and a sense that WorkSource has not been communicating particularly effectively, and that they're not built, you guys are not built to address those needs. And so consequently, there's reluctance to be a partner because they sort of feel like if WorkSource isn't listening to them, that maybe they need to go on their own and do this work on their own as best they can. So I appreciate the direction shift in the concept of the higher program and initiative, because the reality is that when working with the complex needs of some of these clients of these organizations, it takes a holistic approach. It's not just about the job, it's about the support services necessary to help build the confidence, to help address the housing issues, to help address the transportation issues, to help address the child care barriers that prevent people from being able to access gainful employment. And so I guess if I'd like to ask if you could maybe elaborate on what your specific plan is to help build back that trust and how you plan on engaging those key partners and stakeholders that will need to be partners if we're going to move the needle. And then I have a couple of follow-up questions after that.
So we've put a couple of things in place, and I want to again highlight what you had said. I mean, it is a partnership, and we do want to build that trust. As we came out of the gate, our first goal was to make sure that we did have that infrastructure built, and we're about 30 months in. We have a newsletter that we send out specifically to our community partners to ensure that they're aware of hiring opportunities and training opportunities across the county. We meet with our core partners on a monthly basis to do that communication. We have started that communication about common referral forms and talking about the holistic job seeker, which is a very important piece of that. How do we all fit into that continuum? Where does the handoff start to happen? That's really what we need to talk about. What is a positive handoff? When are they job ready? WorkSource Montgomery doesn't determine when they're job ready. the industry does. So making sure that we communicate what it is that the employers are looking for, what kinds of other supports do we need to do? Do we need to make sure that in the infrastructure of all that warm handout, there is more core or essential skill training? Do they practice for interviewing? Is there a desire to understand the process of applying for a job? Is there a desire for more technical skills? We've tried to put a lot of that infrastructure in place and continue to do that as we do that outreach. But we want to be sure that we utilize all of the services and leverage all those services among that continuum. And I think the word continuum that Nancy used early was key to that. So we are working hard to enhance that communication and build that trust, but more importantly is defining and helping build the capacity of all of our organizations to understand what is job ready and how are you going to be successful as we move forward. And that's what we're really working very hard on.
Yes, go ahead.
Part of this is the educational process, and our belief is that the hire centers will become a central core piece of educating all of the community partners on what does it take to be job ready and what is an appropriate referral. And so there are, I know there are times when there are referrals that are made and the ball is dropped, and some of those. Some of the reasons for that drop is just a lack of understanding between what is job ready, what is an appropriate referral. So I'll give you, one example of that. In a recent job fair, there were a community partner brought a couple individuals to the fair. As part of the fair, they fell asleep. In falling, in being brought to that. To a job fair with employers that witnessed this, was that an appropriate referral into the workforce system? And I would say that's not an appropriate referral in. Now, there could have been another way for them to get the support and that's necessary. I think the hire center is our answer to that question. We're looking to train the individuals within this hire center, train our community partners to understand what job ready looks like, so that there are appropriate referrals and that they are referred to our training partners when appropriate, and they're referred for barrier supports when appropriate.
I appreciate both responses and acknowledge it's not easy, and certainly things like newsletters are important, but I would just venture to say WorkSource is at a point where you have to do a lot of grassroots communication with the individual providers, setting up meetings as you did with me, so that they can ask specific questions on what exactly this hire center is going to entail, and then offer them an opportunity to weigh in as you're developing the strategy for the hire centers, because there are many best practices that exist within our own community here in Montgomery County that I think you could better leverage and take advantage of. I know we're short on time, so I just had two follow-up questions. One is related to the Summer Rise program. I was really disappointed, and I so appreciate my colleagues in MCPS stepping forward to tackle this very important assignment. But the fact that we don't have a robust summer youth employment program here in Montgomery County and our other neighboring jurisdictions are eating our lunch is a problem. And Summer Rise is such a unique opportunity, and what really devastated me was recently I referred 3 businesses that never got follow-up phone calls because of the transition being bumpy, and a department within MCPS who graciously has been willing to step forward but has very little capacity in order to be able to carry out the program as it was under the watchful eye of my colleague Will Jawando and WorkSource in partnership together. And so while I know it was just a small snippet and bite, and that month may not have planted all the seeds that we wanted it to, I think that the initiative was more important than just the individual students that were participating in the program. It sent a message that we as a county are fully committed to looking at a holistic approach in addressing summer youth employment challenges. And so I hope moving forward that we step back up and that we continue that effort, because I worry that we're going to take such a drastic step back this summer. The program's going to have a hard time surviving and making it through this transition. So an observation and a comment, and if you want to comment back, that'd be fine.
I'd like to comment on that because I've heard several people speak kind of in regard to, our little teeny tiny piece of the pie in regard to helping students in this county. And I agree it's a huge issue that we have to deal with. But I think that what Ellie's done in putting that in MCPS allows us the bandwidth to be able to put together other opportunities that we can hopefully grow and be able to help some of those other students. That I think that it's not us taking a step back, it's us taking a step sideways and seeing, are there other avenues in addition to the Summarize that we can help? Because I agree, and I think we all here agree that that's really something that we all need to work on.
Well, I appreciate that, but contracts with 3 amazing organizations, but just a handful of youth within each of those contracts is not the system-wide approach that I think WorkSource is in the best position to carry forward. And so that's something that I think we're gonna have to move. But I do appreciate the effort because those are 3 outstanding organizations who one of them have a lot of connection to.
Just adding a couple of things. My organization processes all the payments.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And we have been working with MCPS. We have met with them. We've had multiple meetings to help them figure out the infrastructure. You may or may not know the website is now up for employers to register and for students to register. They're in the process of creating the training classes, so there's momentum with the program.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just probably a question of timing.
Mm-hmm.
That website's only been up literally a couple days.
Okay. All right, well, I appreciate that response. And the final thing, just sort of another important issue that's been brought to my attention as the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, and that's our disability community, particularly parents with adult children with disabilities who have unique and sometimes very specific skills, but there are some nonprofit providers that are out there that are doing their best to connect those particular folks to gainful employment, but I think WorkSource is in an even better position based on your contacts that you can leverage a little bit more effectively. So I would urge WorkSource moving forward as part of your strategic plan to be more intentional about including our disability community as you try to expand efforts in connecting all Montgomery County residents regardless of their ability to gainful employment.
The individuals with disabilities, as you know, that was my passion for 37 years, and I definitely want to always address that. WorkSource Montgomery and Anne Arundel County were the only 2 counties in the state that were awarded a Department of Labor Disability Employment Initiative grant. And we really have probably one of the most comprehensive services through our job center that addressing individuals with disabilities. The whole job center has been set up so that it's accessible. It provides us with job coaching and unique opportunities for individuals with disabilities.
Okay, Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you. This has been a really robust and in-depth conversation. I appreciate you for being here, Ms. Giles, and particularly the volunteer board members who are here to serve and who have volunteered your time, and so I really do appreciate that. I did just want to mention a lot has been said. A lot of the questions that I had and some of the concerns that I have been raised. I don't want to belabor the point. I did want to put a personal note on why I think this is so important, and particularly the incarcerated youth issue. My grandfather actually started and co-founded a program for incarcerated youth with our small family business. We had a car business to teach auto mechanics to returning incarcerated youth so that they would have a career path, some of whom were hired by our family business and some of whom were hired by others, but to give them a tangible skill that they could return to have and to be employable. And so I've seen the benefit of some of these particular programs and how it doesn't just benefit the aspiring worker and the returning citizen or the returning incarcerated youth, but the business benefited from it, the economy benefited from it, society and the broader economy benefited from it. And so it's something that's particularly important to me. I won't belabor that. I had some thoughts on that, but I think by folks who know more than I do, but I did just want to associate myself with the interest in that particular program, because I think it's just absolutely critical to us as a county, not just for the individuals, but for our social goals and our economic needs in order to provide them with the training needed to be able to be productive members of society with a chance to really move forward. We've spent a lot of time today talking about the very specific programmatic issues, and I don't want to belabor some of those questions and concerns that I share with my colleagues, but I did want to kind of take a step back, because today was really also focused on the broader continuum, which you talked about a little bit. And what's been interesting to me is just getting a better understanding of what you see WorkSource Montgomery's role in that continuum. And there's been a lot of talk of handoffs and job fairs, and it feels a little bit like a set it and forget it mentality. And I think it'd be interesting for me to understand where you see WorkSource Montgomery's role specifically in the broader workforce development needs and goals that we have in the county. Because from my perspective, and I wasn't here on the council when it was created, but that was the goal of this being the clearinghouse, the convener and collaborator, bringing together all of these disparate efforts in one place, where county agencies knew where to go, where businesses knew where to go, where job seekers knew where to go in order to get that help. And that doesn't seem to be the theme of some of the responses and some of the conversation that I'm hearing. So I'm just curious if you could respond to what you see specifically WorkSource Montgomery's role in the broad workforce development continuum.
So it's, this is a big county, lots of components that have always worked in isolation of each other, in silos. So it was really important for us to first build an infrastructure so that we were in that position, so that we had connections with all of the components of a workforce system. And that's what we've done in our first couple of years, is build relationships with employers, with our nonprofit partners, with our training partners, formalizing them. Our next step is to really understand the landscape, which has not been done before. And the study we did where we looked at where the resources were was step one. Another step is taking a look at what is the capacity and the range of each of the organizations providing services, and how do we better coordinate that and understand where are the gaps in services, where is the duplication of services, and how do we bring everybody together in one continuum. And moving forward from that and looking at that there's clear communication from all of the components of that workforce system. So we've started that strategy, and it does take time to be a huge paradigm shift in Montgomery County.
And just to summarize that, in simple terms, our vision for WorkSource Montgomery is to be the career and hire center for Montgomery County. Have the relationships with the employers, stroke the demand, aggregate that demand, and then to work with all of our community partners, with all of the training organizations to prepare our workforce for those opportunities.
I appreciate that. My view is, if it's going to be a continuum and for this, function to work as I believe it was intended, I think the organization should be there at the beginning of the continuum and at the end of the continuum to see, where that individual has ended up and what their situation is, because I see it as not just an employment question, but an economic mobility question. And that means not just unemployed, but underemployed. That means providing skills to the existing workforce so they can move up within the workforce. And so I just wanted to raise that. Speaking to that, again, big picture, my understanding is as I've been following this the last several years, we have about 30 to 35,000 open jobs in Montgomery County. We've got a 3.2% unemployment rate, which is relatively low. And so, there's this interesting dynamic where we actually have approximately the same number of jobs as job seekers in a almost 1 million person jurisdiction. And yet those job seekers are not connected with the skills needed to fulfill those jobs. And I see that as a key area where we need to do the job training, skills training, economic mobility question. But what I haven't really had a good handle on is that good? Is that bad? Is that normal? Is that not? Do we have metrics on these types of data points to determine whether or not we're doing this well or poorly? And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I would see that as a key area where WorkSource should be engaged in, directly talking to our employers and, connected with our job seekers. You are at the, the literal inflection point of this huge gap of jobs and job seekers where, we have square pegs and round holes, and we've got to figure out as a government and as non-governmental and quasi-governmental partners of how we round off those squares into the round pegs that can fill the holes that we have in our economy.
So we've spent a lot of time analyzing the labor market data. This is a national issue that we're dealing with, but here regionally and locally, we really have done a lot of time looking at what are the industries and where are those opportunities, and then addressing it through career pathways, because the gap is a skills gap in most cases, where we have the job and there's just not enough people that are trained to meet the demand based on the criteria that the employers have had. So we've really been working a lot with creating as many opportunities through career pathways to address that as possible. We've had two other things that we've been doing within our companies, and that's what we call customized training. That's to do an incumbent worker move up so they can grow your own talent. That opens the door for those entry-level positions within those companies, and we've started to do more of those kinds of customized and incumbent training with our companies. It gets us in understanding the culture and what is in the demand of the companies, but it also creates a career pathway within that company where we can then fill those entry-level positions with new members into the community. So it's a couple of strategies that we've put in place.
Any indication of where we are in terms of other jurisdictions based on that 30 to 35,000 number?
We just finished our regional plan. We're partners with Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County, and their numbers are approximately exactly the same of where we are in Montgomery County.
Okay, and then what's the scale and scope? You talked about some work that you're doing with employers on this issue of moving up, the mobility of entry-level positions to open those positions up for job seekers. How many folks are involved in those programs, and how many businesses, how many jobs are we talking about? How many people are we talking about helping?
Right now, we're doing it through industry, so it's one company at a time. I think we have 4 or 5 companies that we've entered into now with incumbent workers. It's not broad brush, it's building relationships, and that's really where we need to go. Is the more reputation we get with doing that process, and again, it's something that has to be part of the company's culture, that they want to do that, the more I think that will catch on and be a solution in the county.
Yeah, I kind of share I appreciate that work. I think it's important. I think I share some of the thoughts of my colleagues that I don't think we're ever going to get to the 30 to 35,000 by 5 or 10 or 15 at a time. I just a jurisdiction of our size, we need broader and more comprehensive solutions. And I think if this is going to work, I think we need to work in partnership and communicate of what those needs are and figure out how we fill them, whether it's through WorkSource, whether it's through the school system, whether it's through Montgomery College, where do we, whether it's through universities at Shady Grove, but where do we fill that gap? Because 10, 15 at a time, it's just not, we're never going to fill that hole. So related to this, we talked a lot about WIOA and some of the challenges there, and WIOA is very specific, as you noted, and there are questions there, but I'm interested in what happens to the folks after they're no longer WIOA eligible, because that's a fairly tight time frame, and what is WorkSource doing after someone is WIOA eligible, either if they've come to you and are no longer WIOA eligible, or if you've helped them while they were WIOA eligible, but they still have job seeking challenges that they need help with. How are you following up with them, and how does that process work, and what's your role there?
I'm going to just, as a courtesy to the time, I know Councilmember Glass has a press conference. So I was going to suggest, Councilmember Friedson, would it be okay if they sent you that information in writing? Because we are going to schedule, we're going to schedule joint Fed and Education and Culture follow-up committees to get into very, specific details. So
sure, I'll just ask the questions, and then I have a few more questions, then you can send me the answers to the questions if that's okay with you.
That'd be great.
Okay, so I'd be interested in knowing, beyond WIOA, where WorkSource is helping, because I think there's a huge, there's a lot of money that's going into WIOA from the feds, but there's also a large number of people who need help and support beyond WIOA, and I'm interested to see what we're doing there and what our success is. And then related to that, WIOA, we've talked about the metrics and some of the shortcomings and some of the improvements and issues that have arisen on the metrics, but that's been focused tailored to that one particular area. And I'm curious, what metrics are we using for everything else, and how are we determining how well we're doing when it comes to workforce development, and how do we, how do you as a board, how do we as a county assess, whether or not this is working? What are our metrics? What does success look like, and how are we collecting that data? And so if you can provide us with both the current data that you have now in terms of where things are going, whether it's specific to your organization or the broader workforce development, continuum, I'd be interested to see that, and what the standards are that you're holding yourself accountable to, and that we should be holding you accountable to. And then my final question is, there was a few things that were mentioned earlier today. The audit report that said that you had no control issues. I'd be interested if you could share that with the council and with our staff. The WIOA letter from labor that my colleague, Councilmember Rice, asked for, I'd echo that as well. I think it would be helpful for us to see specifically what the challenges are that have been raised. And then Councilmember Jawando talked about and provided us with the letters from the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation of some of the issues that you had. You had mentioned that that those issues were resolved, that they no longer have those concerns. Councilmember Jawando seems to think that that wasn't reflective of the conversation that he's had, and I'd be interested if you have something in writing that reflects the fact that the issues that were raised in the letters that we now have before us have been addressed adequately and successfully. And with that, I'm complete. Thanks.
Thank you. So thank you so much for being here today. Councilmember Reamer and I will work to schedule some follow-up sessions so we can get into some more, in-depth conversation about many of the points that were brought up. I want to acknowledge that Mr. Fletcher is here, who is an assistant CAO for County Executive Elrich, and I know that this is an issue that you will be covering, so we shall look forward to working together on all of this. And to wrap up, I'll just say that we have embarked in a endeavor to adopt an equity policy. I think that it's very important for organizations like yours as well to think through the implications of what it means. And given who we are, Montgomery County, a majority people of color county with a school system that has over 60-something% students of color, that not only your board, but everything that you do and however you consider your expertise to be, that reflects those communities, and so that we can address the issues of our residents. But with that, just want to thank my colleagues for indulging, and for all of you for being here so generous with your time. We are adjourned until 1:30 for public hearing. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing on expedited Bill 3-19, Administration Executive Branch, non-merit positions. This bill will designate certain positions in the executive branch as non-merit positions and generally amend the laws governing non-merit positions in the executive branch. A GO committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, March 7th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business today. Also, as a reminder to the listening audience, if you would like to follow the progress of a council bill, the council's website has a subscribe function. Go to the council's website and use the View Council Records and Legislative Updates link to learn how. And we have as speakers Mr. Andrew Klein from the County Executive, Mr. Gino Wren, EUFCW Local 1994 MAGGIO, Mr. Edgar Gonzalez, individual, and Mr. Jeffrey Buttle from IAFF Local 1664. We'll begin with Mr. Klein.
Good afternoon, Madam President, members of the council. thank you for expediting this bill. I'm Andrew Klein, Chief Administrative Officer. I'm here to present testimony on behalf of County Executive Mark Elrich on Bill 3-19. This bill will designate certain positions in the executive branch as non-merit positions. As a result of this effort, we will be abolishing 6 management positions, creating 3 new non-merit positions, and converting 2 vacant and 4 currently filled senior executive positions to non-merit positions. The net impact of these position changes is a savings of $750,000 starting in fiscal 20 and continuing annually. These savings allow us to minimize reductions with service impacts to our communities in the fiscal 20 budget and beyond. Positions we are requesting to be designated as non-merit fall into 3 categories. 3 newly created positions: Chief Equity Officer, Chief Labor Relations Officer, and Chief Digital Officer. 2 currently vacant positions: Deputy Director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, Deputy Director for the Office of Management and Budget, and 4 currently filled positions: Chief Broadband Officer, Chief Data Officer, Deputy Director of Department of General Services, and Deputy Director of Operations in the Department of Transportation. There are 3 key reasons for designating these positions as non-merit. First, over time, it will enable county government to better respond to emerging challenges, stay ahead of the technology curve, and reflect our changing community in its leadership ranks. Second, it provides more opportunities to regularly refresh the talent pool, ideas, and perspectives that are brought into county government. Third, bureaucracies can become entrenched and intractable. Shifting the culture of an underperforming department usually requires more than changing only the person at the top of the organization chart. I want to stress that all departments will retain 1 merit senior executive position to ensure continuity during leadership transitions. I appreciate the opportunity to share the executive's views and will continue to work with the council to create a government that can effectively respond to the needs of the community.
Thank you very much. Next, can I see this real quick? Next, we have Mr. Gino Wren.
Madam President, with your permission, myself and President Buttle would like to do a joint presentation, if that's okay.
That would be fine, thank you.
There you have it. There you go.
I want to go first. Yes. Afternoon, Madam President, members of the council. Jeff Buttle, President, Montgomery County Career Firefighters Association. We represent 1,582 active and retired firefighters and paramedics employed with Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service. We're here today to speak on the position of the Chief Labor Relations Officer. And I really want to be clear as we start off, we actually support the position of the Chief Labor Relations Officer. We think that it was something that was missing from the last administration for 12 years. We think when that component was not there, that there was some efficiencies as it pertained to dealing with labor that just simply weren't there. So we certainly applaud the new administration's efforts to create this position. We think that it's very important. We do have some, some questions that both Mr. Wren and I had submitted to council. You should have copies of those. Just trying to seek clarity on what this position will be. We want to make sure that when we create this position, it is all-encompassing and that we do it the right way the first time and make sure that we don't miss anything going forward. So I'll highlight a couple of the concerns and then turn over to Mr. Wren to highlight a couple. We noted that of the 3 proposed positions in this bill, that the Chief Labor Relations Officer is the only one that's referenced that could be part-time, and it's unclear to us what circumstances would be, what would the circumstances be in which the Chief Labor Relations Officer would be part-time. We certainly feel as though this is an important position that needs to be a full-time position and be the full-time focus of somebody. We also are a little unclear of how the Chief Labor Relations Officer's role would be in implementing the county executive's vision when it comes to labor relations and dealing with the workforce and with employees. So just from the position description, we're not entirely clear what the roles and responsibilities of the Chief Labor Relations Officer would be in that aspect. And then additionally, I'll wrap up with this and then turn it over to Mr. Wren for the remainder. The description states that the Chief Labor Relations Officer would supervise a small number of employees, and it's unclear to us what is meant by small number. And our concern there is that if we're going to have a Chief Labor Relations Officer, in addition to that his staff needs to be large enough to be able to support that position. We've had some issues in human resources, which is going separate with the positions not having adequate staff. So with that, I can turn over to Mr. Wren, and he can finish highlighting the remainder of our concerns that we have with the position. Thank you.
Mr. Wren.
Thank you. Yes, I want to first say again and reiterate what President Buttle has said. We enthusiastically support the creation of the position. Back in the Duncan days, we had a similar structure. It wasn't official in nature, but he designated one of his special assistants as the labor liaison, and that was Sarah Lee Todd. And it worked well because there weren't any obstacles to us to get to the executive on important issues. Sarah Lee would be the conduit, and we resolved a lot of important problems and challenges through that system. So this position will serve the program well. Here's the bottom line. All three unions in this county government have negotiated model contracts. If you look at our contracts on a national level, they're model contracts in a lot of different areas. Dispute resolution is one of the areas that we take great pride in. And we have the opportunity to build a national model labor relations program. That's why we're here. We want to make sure that this position has the authority, the scope of portfolio of duties, and labor relations is a vast portfolio, has adequate staffing and resources to do what's right by this workforce of 10,000 people. Labor relations is hard, and it's only done well in corroboration with the unions and the workforce with skilled, experienced people. And we just want to make sure that there's adequate resources, that we have that type of staffing. I'm not going to read all the questions. You can do that on your own. But what we would like to come away with after this today and then the GO work session and with continued conversations with the executive branch to make sure that this position does what it's intended to do and eliminate the obstruction from department heads, eliminate all the political gamemanship that particular person has encountered over years from department and upper management, and make sure it's just a wholesome position that is in charge of labor relations and will work with the unions in collaboration and partnership to do good things, not just for the workforce, but for the community at large. That's our intent.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you.
Edgar, can you please press the button at the base there?
Good afternoon, members of the County Council. My name is Edgar Gonzalez, and I'm currently the Deputy Director of the Department of Liquor Control. I had been continuously employed with the Montgomery County government since February 21st, 1979. That is 40 years and 15 days ago. That's more than some of you were not even born. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the Universidad Nacional de Colombia, a master's degree in transportation planning and traffic engineering from the University of Maryland, where I attended as a Fulbright scholar, and a master's degree in public policy as a mid-career fellow at the University of Maryland. I graduated at the top of my class. I have served the residents of Montgomery County for more than 40 years in different capacities. For 36 of those 40 years, I played important roles in developing transportation policy and building transportation projects for the county. As the county engineer for 10 years, I directed or was involved in the design, property acquisition, and construction of more than 300 transportation projects. I'm summarizing my testimony because it was too long. As the county engineer, as the Deputy Director for Transportation Policy for 15 years, I played a major role in the review of transportation elements of master plans, interacted with the design, construction, and operation of regional projects, including Metro, the Purple Line, and the ICC. Finally, I led the development, monitoring, and implementation of the Improvement Action Plan in the Department of Liquor Control. I have researched other expedited bills proposed by the county executive and approved by this council in the past. I found Expedited Bill 1208 and Expedited Bill 910. These two unanimously adopted bills abolish several positions from the county government and simultaneously offer additional retirement benefits to any employee who volunteered to retire and met the retirement criteria or were within 2 years of retirement. The 2008 bill offered an incentive of $25,000, and the 2010 offered $35,000. The offers were made to employees regardless of salary. To some, the retirement incentive meant 1 year's salary. To others, 6 months' salary. But to all, at least $35,000 in 2010 dollars. In contrast to those two bills, Expedited Bill 319 is not voluntary. It abolishes 3 specific occupied positions. It offers no additional retirement incentives. The bill abolishes 3 MLS1 positions, the highest level positions protected by the county merit system. These positions are currently occupied by a female, an African American, and a Latino, all members of protected categories under the EEO law. In my case, I must deal with the involuntary loss. I have 15 seconds. In my case, I must deal with the involuntary loss of a merit system position I have worked very hard to reach for over half of my life. I oppose this bill as currently written. However,
Mr. Gonzalez, I appreciate it.
10
Your time
seconds.
is up. 10 seconds, just as a courtesy for all the years that you've been working in Montgomery County.
Thank
But
you.
10 seconds.
Thank you. I would support the bill if the council addressed the options that I presented in my testimony on Circle 14.
Yes.
I urge you to do that for equity and fairness.
Thank you. We
very
will
much.
consider the written testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Just had a question I wanted to direct to Chief Administrative Officer Klein. So the proposal creates 3 new, it creates 3 new non-merit positions,
Yes.
and it converts a number of existing positions.
Right.
My question is around the savings number.
Mhm.
It seems to me you're counting the vacant positions that you convert toward the savings total. Is that accurate or no?
No. There's, I believe, one case where we are separate from the positions converted to non-merit, where we're converting an existing position
Right.
to create one of the new ones, which reduces the net cost of that position. But we're not counting any savings from the positions converted from merit to non-merit.
Okay,
But
so
we-
you're
but
not
we-
counting
but-
saving from the
We're
from the
actually-
vacant
we are
positions.
actually abolishing 6 positions.
It's the positions that are being abolished.
Yes,
that
generate the savings.
Generate the savings. And
Net of the cost of the new positions.
Okay, and I feel respectfully I must acknowledge that Mr. Gonzalez is one of those positions, obviously.
Yes.
Okay, I think I understand it a little better then, because my interpretation of it initially was that the vacant positions were being counted as though they weren't being funded, but when you replace a filled position with a vacant position, you're spending more, not less, but it doesn't appear that that's where that figure came from. Thank you.
Okay, I do have a couple more lights. I do want to remind my colleagues that the GO committee is going to take this up on Thursday. So of course, that's when we're going to get into the actual work session. This is just a public hearing. So I would just, remind everybody. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. My question and comment is directed to Mr. Klein. The positions for which the descriptions have been drafted, the one piece of information from the job descriptions that is causing alarm to me is there's no salary range associated with any of the positions. And as you remember, when you last or first time sat before us, I talked about the high salaries going to directors and upper tier
Yes.
management. So just explain this to me.
So we based for the new positions we created in doing the our estimate of the savings associated with this bill. We assumed salaries of 170,000 plus benefits, which average about 40,000 for a position like that. That doesn't mean those are going to be the actual salaries. Once we hire people and negotiate that. But as I explained in my confirmation hearing, we are very mindful of trying to keep the salaries below incumbents. In this case, there are no previous incumbents in those positions, but we want to make sure that we're consistent based on level of responsibility that these positions entail.
Okay.
And then if we can have, what we'll do though, for council members, if you can please direct any questions to Ms. Myhill so that we can consider those on Thursday, because again, this is just a public hearing, we need to wrap up. It's not a council session, it's not a work session, so Ms. Myhill will be staffing us, and between now and Thursday, I have a lot of other questions as well, especially after the ones that have been raised, so we will engage in a thorough work session. It doesn't mean we're gonna take votes on Thursday necessarily if we don't have everything fleshed out, but please do send those questions to them so we can get into that kind of conversation.
Real quick, last thing I will just say is as you determine those salaries, I hope you do not base them on previous pay of those individuals.
Okay, Councilmember Hucker.
Put a stop to that. I had other questions on the merits of the position that I just checked my schedule, so I can attend the GO session. I look forward to asking them then. But to follow up on my colleague's question, I know we had asked the previous county executive to create a salary scale for, because many of us, especially Councilmember Leventhal, led on this, but it was certainly supported by the current county executive. We were concerned about the growth in management over the last 10 years especially, and both in the number of positions and in the very high salaries. And there was a salary scale that was put forward, but many of us thought it wasn't very meaningful and responsive to the council's concerns. Do you anticipate putting forward an updated salary scale that might be more responsive to the growth of management salaries?
Let me get back to you on that. I know some about the history that a scale was sent over. I've seen that scale and that it was not acted upon, and so I'll have to take that back and follow up with the council.
If you could get back to us, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam President.
Yeah, it was not acted upon because it was not what the council had requested, so we need to get that done. Right, Councilman Friedson.
Yeah, I have lots of questions. I'll save them for the GO committee. I did just want one to echo the question. I think that this should be discussed in context with that salary scale, and so I'm hopeful that for the GO session that you'll be prepared to discuss that, of what the thoughts are for this administration with respect to that, because I think it is an ongoing concern, not just for the colleagues who were here previously, but for those of us who are new. But I was hoping, before getting into all the specific questions that I'll have at GO, what is the urgent need for expediting this? I mean, this is a significant change to some of these positions. It affects 3 specific careers. What is the specific need? I mean, the administration has not filled all of its open positions that it has the ability to fill currently with existing vacancies that we have today. The bargaining process is seeming like it's coming to its conclusion for this budget cycle. So what specifically is the need for us to move so quickly on this?
We're anxious to fill out the team. We are interviewing. We will have more candidates in front of you. So the reason we asked for this to be expedited was just to speed up filling out the executive team for this administration.
Okay, so with that, the public hearing is closed, and we will again have a work session on Thursday. I urge my colleagues to please send any additional questions to Amanda, and we will engage in a, I think, lively conversation. Thank you very much for being here today. And we are going to adjourn until 7:30 when we will have a public hearing. Thank you.